Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the War Report. And if you haven't guessed it by the title, as promised, Geo is back because we have articles to read, and we can't read them without Geo.
Salam alaikum, my brothers.
So true.
Glory to Elijah Muhammad. Glory. The Yakubian menace will be defeated.
I mean, I didn't know you had such strong feelings about Armenia, but.
Oh God.
I mean, I have strong feelings about Armenia, and they're not all negative. I have a little bit of a soft spot for them, but that is very. I mean, we're either jumping the gun or completely off topic because we have a lot of topics. We have map updates. Yeah. We have articles to read. We have words that I cannot use on air that I'm trying to think of substitutes.
We have global techno-fascist Satanism.
The usual spread.
We've been here before.
Yeah.
Can you believe that just 8 years ago the show was solely about tracking granular map movements on Syria, and now we've elevated, to tracking granular map movements in Ukraine.
That's what it's called the War Report.
Yeah, we used to talk about wars exclusively.
Yeah,
what wars? We won them already.
We won 109 wars, all of them. We got the peace treaty. Pakistan negotiated. Pakistan also deserves the Nobel Peace Prize because they've been Trump's best friend ever since he stopped war in India. And that one marshal he is on speed dial.
Benazir Bhutto thing's forgiven. It's over.
So thank you, Pakistan. You've done a great service for us.
To really humanity.
Yes. What would we do without you, Pakistan?
Yeah.
But I suppose we should begin the minutia minute before we drag the show out any longer.
Yeah.
It needs to be.
So I've actually got some recent maps, some from today and some from yesterday. We'll start with the most recent maps, which are basically in Kupyansk, Donetsk Republic, and then a little bit in Zaporozhye, and then we'll move with yesterday's maps that are in Sumy or Kharkov. So we begin with Kupyansk, which has not changed very much from the last time we did the show, Constantine. But the Russians now are in these no man's lands. They have entered some of the areas just outside of the city of Kupyansk. They are still in Kupyansk. But as you can see, there's a lot of gray area. And this is one of the most intense battles going on in the duration of the war so far. This is in Kupyansk, Vuzlovi. So as you can see, maybe we'll move to the next slide. This will give us an idea. So what the Russians are doing is they're using these open areas in order to infiltrate. Again, another aspect of drone warfare is both the Russians and the Ukrainians are using this effectively. And that is, you have small numbers of men that infiltrate way past the front lines. And then what they do is they give coordinates, they give help to their own drone operators to send drones in a certain way, that would attack their enemy, their respective enemies. And that's basically what's happening here. Now, the map here has, except for the big white areas, which the Russians captured last week and a few days earlier, not much has changed. But Kupyansk has been one of those battles where there's been intentionally from both sides, for whatever reason, very few map updates. Now, that could be to conceal their movements, which I'm sure plays a role. The other is there hasn't been that much change to begin with. The next slide will show you where the Russians have situated themselves behind the front lines. The two dots, the one in the center, that's the newest one. The other two lower down, the Russians have been there again for several weeks. So I'm not sure what's exactly going on here. Um, we're going to get into a little bit of material and body and material attrition, human life attrition, and also the territorial gains. Despite the fact that this war is mainly about attrition and not so much about um, gaining territory. In any case, um, so you can see that this is where the Russians have situated themselves, and for whatever reason, the Ukrainians cannot close these gaps, and the Russians cannot fill these gaps either, or at least that's what we have so far. Now, let's move to Slavyansk. And as you can see in Slavyansk, I've circled three areas. So the circle way at the top is Liman. The next one down is Slavyansk, and the circle at the beneath Slavyansk, the one most closest to the bottom, is Kramatorsk. Um, the Russians made some territorial gains here. I'm going to get into why this is going to be a very difficult battle for the Russians. Um, but acquaint yourself with this map, and now let's we're going to zoom in and then zoom out, and I'll explain why it'll be difficult. So the Russians here have moved ever closer, and they are like one of the places that they do want to capture is a town very close. It's only about less than 5 kilometers away, and that's Rai Oleksandrovka. Yeah, Rai Oleksandrovka. So Rai Oleksandrovka is important for several reasons. It can act as a logistical hub for, I would say, based on the size of this town, for a small number of troops. Now, the war has matured that way, where both sides are using small numbers, and that's because uh, material like devices like infantry fighting vehicles, tanks, they're all very susceptible to drone attacks. And the last show, which I'm very sorry, the audio was very poor we've
No,
been,
the
of
audio
course, intent.
was classic. Okay, that's what you'd get from 2019 War Report. I'm
Yeah.
no, I'm kidding.
Yeah,
I'm sorry about that. My internet is always a battle of two steps forward, one steps back. It's I apologize, but for those of you who have been around for the long haul, number one, thank you. Number two, you know what I'm talking about.
yeah, yeah. Especially my voice then sounded horrible. Still does kind of. But anyways, so um, the reason this is important is going to be better clarified with the next slide. And you can see sort of the limit to where the Russians are going to go before it starts getting hard. That big circle, which is just east of Slavyansk, is at a hilltop, and that's Mykolaievka. Um, of course, you can see that there's three layers of fortification before you get to Slavyansk, so this will be a very difficult battle. I don't think this battle is going to begin probably until the late fall of 2026, if you want an estimate. Um, so that's the situation in Slavyansk. Now, the Russians have been very steady here, making territorial gains all throughout the year. The places where they've made the least amount of gains have been in, no, this is technically in Donetsk, but in southern Donetsk, around Pokrovsk. While the Ukrainians have been effective in pushing the Russians out of certain areas of in the Dnieper region, in the eastern Dnieper region, and in the eastern Zaporozhye region. That situation is stabilized now for 10 days. Russians have I don't have the slides anymore, but Russians have made gains there. So far, it's stable, but you'll see with more slides in western Zaporozhye, the Ukrainians have been very effective in reducing the amount of gains that the Russians have had there. Now, if you do a tally, and I'll get to that slide later on, if you do a tally, overall the Russians gained more territory than the Ukrainians did so far in the first 3 months of 2026. The thing is they're offset because the Russians are gaining more territory in those northern regions, northern Donetsk, but also Sumy, Kharkov, than they and parts of Zaporozhye. Put an asterisk on it because the Ukrainians did have a very successful January, February, and early March in one sector there. So we're going to get into that later. So, anyways, that is the situation in Slavyansk. So look for the late fall for them to get closer, unless somehow the Russians prioritize. Now, several people, several of these geopolitical channels have talked about a spring offensive. The Duran is no exception. I tend not to listen to them when they talk about that, only because I don't know. I think sometimes it's optimistic, but if History Legend has two videos on an upcoming summer offensive, then I listen. But I'm contradicting myself
Yeah.
because I still haven't watched those videos. But I noticed those videos. It's just that there's so much other news right now that I haven't had time to look at them.
What are you
There's
talking
other,
about? Nothing ever happens.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I
So
think they'll
that,
try to if something does pop off in Iran, they'll try to stealth the globalists, or no, by doing an offensive, or nah, that's not.
I would say, I mean, so far 2026 is slower than 2025 for the Russians.
Yeah.
2025 was their most successful year. Ignoring 2022, 2024 was far more successful than 2023. We shall see how it's going to go, because right now the roads are going to get firm. The rains are going to eventually dissipate. We're going to get in May where it's going to be warmer weather. The foliage is growing back. Of course, in Zaporozhye, it's different because all these farmers' fields, they haven't been attended to for 4 years. And so they're all very overgrown. And it's allowed both sides to infiltrate each other effectively.
But I will say, in response to your question, as things stand right now, I think the Russians are conducting this war independent of events in Iran, that they have their strategy, they have that set
Yeah.
forth. It can change based on conditions involving Ukraine, but they aren't going to retool it in a wider game against Iran. That is a separate mode of management, if you will.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, with these drone attacks on Russian oil refineries, not just in Crimea or, Sevastopol, or in, one of the drone places that does manufacturing was hit a week ago or about 4 or 5 days ago, in Taganrog, like in that area, on the Azov Sea. Um, There was a cargo ship from 2 or 3 weeks ago that was attacked. Two of the sailors were killed. They were exporting wheat, essentially. But I'm also talking about um, now they opened one of the oil refineries in the Gulf of Finland. There's two of them, one on the southern side and one on the northern side. The one that got open was hit yet again. So, and we know now that the Finns, the Estonians, the Latvians, the Lithuanians, all of them are allowing Ukraine to use their airspace to attack. The Russians have said that they will retaliate if they see drones. They will go into these spaces where, even if it means going into, let's say, Estonian airspace to shoot down a drone, they will. So remains to be seen. I've heard this kind of talk
Yeah.
before, but I don't know.
But overall, what a wonderful trade-off for Finland and the Baltic states, where they join NATO, they become drone launching platforms. They not only have to languish economically as a consequence for this war, especially Finland.
Yeah.
What's been happening there economically is very
Yes, I've
underreported,
seen the
including by
lineup
this show.
for.
Yeah, but believe Sama told me it's all right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
you know,
It's the Finno-Ugric supremacy, but we're also
yeah.
supposed to hate the Russians because they're
isn't
Finno-Ugric.
going to food banks brown coated?
No, but like I'm sure like all the like usual idiotic commentators are like, well, that'll trigger Article 5. That's great. Which I mean that
I
was
don't
the
know.
whole
Maybe it will. Maybe it won't.
Well, Article
yeah.
5 is just a promise to do something, and that something can just be a pat on the back.
Article 5 literally is sort of like the I know it's like like a vulgar Bojanian analysis, but really, you know, Article 5 is a hyper object. It's like it's there, it's real one day, but not the next. But only if America says it's real, like
That's right.
Washington says it's real. That's it. You know,
Yeah.
it's a simulacrum of a bygone 20th century Westphalian geopolitic prompt. You know,
But I do love how vague its application is because it only
yeah.
requires you to do something. No military intervention, just something. And that something could, as I just said, be a simple pat on the back.
Or
But the
a
Baltics get
strongly worded
overrun.
letter.
It's just Kaya Kallas, or well, I suppose she would be caught up in that. I don't know. Is she in Brussels or Estonia? Who cares? But Macron and Starmer and Trump, they're gonna wag their finger at Putin, and that's going to constitute a fulfillment of Article 5. And if you don't believe me, look at American documents from the 1960s saying that yeah, the Soviets launch a war in continental Europe. We're going to hold off. We're not going to get them involved. We'll get around to it.
Now the Russians did enter. I forget whether it was Latvia or Estonia. They did enter their space
I believe
a
it was
day or two
Estonia.
ago. Yeah, with a tactical bomber, one of their TU series bombers, and an Su-35. So they're flexing. You know, there was a cargo ship with oil that the British attempted to stop, but when they discovered that there was a Russian submarine, they backed off. There was a whole ruckus in their in their Commonwealth, sorry, in their Parliament, common, uh, um, you know, asking, you know, condemning Russia for doing this. But
No, Lithuania's the one with the Commonwealth, or was.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's finish up the maps. We're almost done.
Okay,
So
okay.
okay,
Yeah, I
so
want to talk
very
about the
little.
oil fields too. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So let's finish off Pokrovsk, and then we just have Zaporozhye, and we're done. I promise. It's just 4 more slides. So as you can see, the Russians, the front lines in Pokrovsk have been pretty static. The Ukrainians have attempted since the last show to, I don't know why, re-enter Pokrovsk, but it hasn't worked. The Russians today gained a small territory outside of Rodinske. You'll see that on the next slide. Now it's outlined in red. This is a tiny territory, but the Ukrainians sometimes were in this area. I don't know. There is a heap there, so there is like a big hill that oversaw Rudinske, and it was used for logistics and tactical maneuvers to try to re-enter Rudinske. So that's it for Pokrovsk, and finally we come to Zaporozhye. So you can see the Ukrainians outlined in yellow. They've taken a good deal of territory, not quite as much as they did in the Dnepropetrovsk region, but sizable. And now this time they've pushed out the Russians from one of the towns that they were in. Uh, where is it? Yeah, Primorske. So now the Russians are like only control about half of Primorske, so or a third. So whatever it is the Ukrainians are doing, it's still effective in slowing down the Russians. Next, we come to Sumy and Kharkov, and you can see where like most of the gains are happening right now in the winter. It's up there. I think part of it is just to draw the Ukrainians away from the Donetsk and Zaporozhye region. Personally, because I think a lot of these territories, the Russians, I think, you know, I know they've said that they would like a buffer zone, yes, but I think also part of the strategy is you can renege on that and say, well, if you give us this territory, we'll give you that territory, et cetera, et cetera. So let's begin with the Sumy region. I've outlined where Sumy is. And again, very small gains along the border. The Russians here are um, have captured an area called Taratun, Taratuni, Taratutine, Taratutine. So, but the important thing about Taratutine is that it could be a stepping stone if, again, if the Russians decide to go further to Krasnopolya. Krasnopolya is a bigger village. Obviously, it's several times larger. The difficulty here is they don't have any, like, they have roads, but not, I would say, major highways to push for big gains. Now, moving a little bit closer to where the action is happening in Kharkov and the Volchansk area, the Russians have made some gains here as well. Uh, you can see the overall map. This is not far um, from Kupyansk, right? The Russians are still on the west side of the Oskol River in the northern territory of Kharkov, and Kupyansk is part of Kharkov. So, and this is a blow up of the regions that they captured. These regions in Volchansk are from yesterday, just to let you know. We're recording this on Thursday, the 23rd, and people will be watching this tomorrow on the 24th. Now, I promised that I would have some slides about the vehicle losses, and then there would be another forthcoming slide that would indicate how they fit overall into material losses, the loss of life for both armies. So this slide, as you can see, encapsulates January, February, and March. And we see tanks. So tanks destroyed 12 versus 18. The Ukrainians have lost 18, the Russians 12 in January. Then in February, the Russians lost 5 tanks versus Ukrainian 10 tanks. These are all from Austin accounts. So it's anti-Russian Austin accounts that are getting the confirmed destroyed material, and it's the reverse. It's Russian siding Austin accounts or neutral ones for the Ukrainian side. So you can't say that it's skewed. So March again, almost a parity. The Russians lose 13 tanks, Ukrainian 14. Infantry fighting vehicles, 9 versus 15, 3 versus 16, Russia 15 versus 17. APCs, 7 versus 31, 6 versus 42. It should be said that I think, no, it's the armored cars that the Ukrainians use much more of. So, and then 10 versus 52. Again, very much in Russia's favor.
And just
And
to
most of
remind everyone,
Mm.
what's the source in these?
these are Austin. Oh, so, what's his name? The Australian guy?
Willie
Oh,
OAM, is that the one?
yeah,
Okay,
Will OAM. Yeah. So this was on his channel a few days ago.
okay.
Yeah. He'll explain. He'll re. I mean, you'll hear everything I've told you in more detail if you watch the show. Please don't watch the show. Subscribe. No, I'm joking. Okay, so now you look at armored vehicles, and it's 117 in March versus 4, in February 91 versus 2, in January 0 versus 81. SPGs are very important because one of the reasons why tanks are getting hit pretty hard by both sides is because they're being used like SPGs. So 3 versus 29, 4 versus 35, 3 versus 49. MLRS, 3 versus 3, 12 versus 4. The Ukrainians this time are ahead, and 8 versus 1. So if you look at total material losses for January, Russians 34, Ukraine 178, 33 versus 198, and 55 versus 256. So this could be one of the reasons why Europe and America are having a very difficult time to try to, and why they're focusing so much on drone warfare, because the heavier vehicles are just getting smashed, and it's undoubtable that the Ukrainians are suffering more catastrophic losses. Now, the next slide uh, will show you basically the gains in 2025 with losses, combined military vehicle losses with Russian net territorial gains, and you can see that the Ukrainians, except for from let's say January and part of February and probably April, for a good deal of April, the Ukrainians are losing more vehicles and more territory, right? With the exception being around March 2025. So that's something to keep in mind. And there was an exchange of dead. We've explained on the show that the Russians only gained like 150 kilometers more than the Ukrainians in the first quarter of 2026. That's not a lot considering how much the Ukrainians gained. That has created a net effect to reduce the amount that the Russians have gained, and yet they literally received 1,000 dead bodies versus 41, right? So, I mean, I can see why Putin is playing this attritional strategy, right? So that's it for the maps. If you guys want to continue with more Russia Ukraine related news, we can go to that, and maybe we can finish off this segment with Emanuel Todd's uh, little, the essay that he wrote
Oh yeah, I'd be more
not
than
long
Yeah.
ago.
willing to do that. Do you have a source where I can screen share it?
The what?
The essay, or did you just have
Uh,
excerpts you wanted to do?
I can. Yeah. Here, hang on.
Yeah, so I saw recently that the Ukrainians had successfully, but well, they probably had American intelligence uh, or operation, but they managed to successfully bomb one of the largest oil fields in Russia. I
Yeah,
forget what was it called. GSP.
it starts with a U. I think it's that's the one up by the Gulf of Finland.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
pretty sure it's up there. Like again, they had it running about 10 days ago, and then it got hit again.
yeah.
I mean, they're very determined, but I would also say that with the crisis in the Gulf, the futures for oil in America, they've made 5 billion. The
Hmm.
Russians have made 19 billion.
No, but what's funny,
Ustaluga is the port that
Yeah,
you hit.
Ustaluga, yeah,
That's it. That's it.
yeah,
And Primorsk is the other one.
And I'm quoting Bloomberg here. Right, this is
Uh-oh.
not a Russian source, so
yeah, yeah. No, but what's interesting is that the cheerleaders of the war, um, on the Ukrainian side, the discourse around it was that like this is going to cripple Russia. This is going to send, but also it's going to send a message to America that like the war is ours, and Agent Krasnov in Washington isn't gonna like tolerate this where he forces us to buy Russian oil and we're independent and we're gonna do it. It's like I
American
think,
intelligence, American coordination. That's
yeah,
really going to show Trump.
and probably American munitions. Let's be real.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't think it was just normal FPV drones that did this. It was probably some kind of more advanced coordinated drone system, or even just the explosions and everything did seem. I mean, it could just be the process of oil refining itself, but like the actual footage of these oil refineries going up seemed pretty extensive. Not to say the Russians are not going to compensate by shifting production elsewhere, but the discourse around it has been like abysmal in the sense of like this is going to like facilitate the final blow to where like we will reject Russian oil and we'll reject the dictates of Washington. But like you were saying, Constantine, this is like I could imagine there was serious coordination between the British, the Americans, and the Ukrainians.
Oh no, I'll pick up on that.
No.
And as somebody who has often come to the defense of the Europeans, my hard line is when they start saying stuff like this, where
Yeah.
it's you, number one, correctly identify that you are the vassals of Washington, that for 80 years since the end of World War II, you've been taking marching orders, you've been doing just about everything, and I won't say quite everything, but just about everything that they want you to do, including this Ukraine war that they foisted upon you, that outside of Ukraine itself, you've been the primary victims of in terms of the second and third order effects of this war. And when Trump has a conciliatory meeting with Putin one time in, I don't know, about 8 years between
Yeah.
Helsinki and Alaska, you become so determined to quote unquote break free of the American empire that you buy American weapons to give them to Ukraine. You get American intelligence from NATO to give it to Ukraine in order to conduct an attack that ultimately serves Zio-American interests vis-a-vis the war in Iran.
And probably has American operators at its base as well.
Oh, absolutely.
They're doing the actual mission.
And
so,
then the
yeah.
Euro-Federalists pat themselves in the back. They talk about how this is what Napoleon would have wanted. And then they post their Macron vaporwave edits. And
Macron and Kaya Kallas are not exactly Napoleonic material right there.
I mean,
but yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so go ahead.
That's all I had to say. If
no, but like the gloating over that this is gonna like totally cripple the Russian economy and it's over for them.
It's the replacement for the wonder weapons. Remember the wonder weapons?
Oh yeah, the javelins. Then it was the HIMARS.
All of this was going to
the F-16.
The F-16, yes.
Yeah.
The HIMARS.
80s weapons platforms. Yeah, it's gonna change the war.
Right. So, yeah. Now I've looked at the article by Emanuel Todd. It is extremely long, and we don't have.
We will dedicate a show to that in the indeterminate future. Okay, that will happen. I'm not going to give you a date.
Okay, if you want, I'll read just a few paragraphs.
Please
if
give us the
okay.
teaser of what we will eventually
this
get into.
This is well into the essay. Okay, so Nazism and the pre-war far-right movements found their social epicenter in the middle classes, particularly the upper middle classes, who felt threatened by labor, social, democratic, and communist movements. These middle classes were feverish, busy locking up their women and persecuting homosexuals. You have to put up with Emanuel Todd. I mean, he is left of center. Today, on the contrary, so-called far-right movements find their epicenter in working class circles, particularly in the impoverished working world, shaken or destroyed by economic globalization and threatened by immigration. Today's middle classes, largely defined by higher education, are less or even slightly affected by the far right. The upper middle classes, who combine higher education and high incomes, are particularly immune. This is why I prefer to talk about popular conservatism rather than the far right. Its roots in dominated group explain the defensive nature of popular conservatism. Its voters cannot imagine conquering Europe or the world if they see their own lives are as a matter of survival. The real intellectual mistake would be to stop there. Let us continue to move forward, even turning the problem of the association between ideology and class on its head. We have compared the ideologies of the present with those of the past. Now let us compare the classes of the present with the past. Some European middle classes between the wars went mad. The working class was more reasonable. But are today's middle classes, particularly the upper middle classes, reasonable? Are they peaceful? What are their dreams? They are crazy. The construction of a post-national Europe is a delusional project when one considers the diversity of the continent. It has led to the expansion of the European Union, cobbled together with unstable into the former insatiable into the former Soviet space. The EU is now Russophobic and warmongering, with its aggression renewed by its economic defeat at the hands of Russia. The EU is trying to drag the British, French, and German, and many other peoples into a real war. But what a strange war it would be, in which Western elites have adopted Hitler's dream of destroying Russia. The compensation by social class therefore allows us to make the major intellectual breakthrough. Europeanism, therefore Macronism, fall through their external aggressiveness and on the side of nationalism, on the side of the pre-war far right. If we add to this increasingly massive and systemic violations of freedom of information and popular suffrage within the EU, we come even closer to the notion of the far right. Founded as an association of liberal democracies, Europe is mutating into a far right space. Yes, the comparison with the 30s is useful, even indispensable. In the grandiose Europeanist project, we find a psychological dimension already observable in Hitlerism. Paranoia. Europeanist paranoia focuses on Russia. Nazi paranoia made the Jewish threat a priority, without, however, neglecting Russian Bolshevism, known as Judeo Bolshevism. Today is yesterday. We can therefore analyze the psychology of Europe's ruling class, the bizarre sequence of events that began with Trump's election, with the unstable president's desire to talk to Putin, allowed us to follow live as our leaders lost touch with reality. Let us summarize our delusional process. It began around 2014, before, during, and after Maidan. The coup d'etat that disintegrated Ukraine, remotely controlled by American and German strategists. And then he cites some articles that were written by him and others, but they're just titles. The shift of European governments into a parallel reality begins in 2025. Let us draw for our defeat the idea that we can finally impose our will and install our troops in Ukraine to annex what remains of the EU. But how can we not think of Hitler locked in this bunker in 1945, giving orders to the armies that no longer exist? Today in Europe, we are dealing with madmen, or rather, with a collective madness that has gripped individuals from the dominant social classes en masse. In France alone, thousands of journalists, politicians, academics, business leaders, and senior civil servants are participating in the collective hallucination of a Russia that would want to conquer Europe. That's paranoia. No individual can be held personally responsible. We're dealing with a collective psychological dynamic. I am convinced that the shrinkage of the individual born of the zero state of religion explains the emergence of these shoals of Russophobic fish. As I explained in Class Struggles in France in the 21st Centuries, that was one of his books that he wrote, the disappearance of the collective beliefs, religious beliefs, and then ideological beliefs of zombie religion, of a zombie religious state, has led to the collapse of the human superego. Unlike the activists for the liberation of the ego, I do not define the superego as solely or even primarily repressive. The superego, as the ideal of the ego, anchors positive moral and social values in the person. The notions of honor, courage, justice, honesty find their origin and strength in the superego. If it weakens, they weaken. If it disappears, they disappear. In the end, therefore, humanity has not been liberated by the end of religion and ideologies, but rather diminished. It is highly educated men and women, morally and intellectually stunted by the absence of religion, who are, en masse, carriers of the Russophobic pathology. The Nazi and anti-Semites that had a completely different psychological constitution. The death of God, to quote Nietzsche, had certainly launched them on the quest for a Führer, but they were hardly lacking in superego and remained capable of collective action. The tragic performance of the Russian army during the Second World War bears witness to that. Who today would dare to imagine our upper middle classes rushing to their deaths at the head of their peoples towards Kiev and Kharkov? Our war in Ukraine is a joke, a product of emancipation of the self, the offspring of personal development. Only Ukrainians and Russians will die, unless thermonuclear exchanges can do without heroes. That was actually from October 2025. So that's part of the essay. It's much longer, but anyways, I thought that was interesting.
Oh, it would definitely warrant a full episode at some point. Like I said,
Yeah,
even if that's the only thing we do, we need to do that at some point.
it's
I mean, he talks
yeah.
about zombie religion. That's one of his things. Like, he believes that in the West, they've reached not a stage where people just act out religion. It's a zombie. And he sees this more so in Europe than in America.
Hmm.
But I thought that was one of the most interesting takes, one of the most interesting insights, because it is like, most of the people, like even in America, most of the people that support the Ukraine war are white boomers, right? But also, just broadly speaking, liberals,
Yeah.
right? And how he links that with like self-expression and self-actualization, because there's no superego anymore.
It's no, but it's like the Russian, like their like rival boomer perspective of like their the West is filled with like
Degenerates.
degenerate Nazi liberal
Yeah, yeah.
Masonic Nazi liberals. Yeah, like it's a very incoherent
Yeah,
like not
there's that one
It's
guy from the Crimea
it's
documentary
incoherent
where
it's incoherent until you're them, and then you just look at who attacked you.
yeah, they're describing a coalition of their enemies.
Yeah, that's all they're describing. They're not describing
yeah,
how that would ideologically work.
exactly.
They're stuffing it. They're truncating it. I get it from a purely ideological
It's like
perspective.
a Dugan tweet. The Anran, the modernity, the Satan Palantir, like the techno-fascist,
Yeah,
satanic, globalist. Um, no, but that's I think Emanuel Todd. What he's getting at is that because I know like certain people in the audience they like freak out at this, but like I think it's trying to replicate the form of like 20th century Austrian painterism without the actual content
yeah.
but in
But
and
in a
yeah
way, that's I mean, in a way, Todd is saying that you have liberals who are dreaming, let's say, what Hitler would have wanted. You
yeah
know, the Lebensraum. You know, all Russians will
but
live
like without the
west
with
eugenics
of the
without the
rainbows.
east of the Urals.
anti-semitism yeah
Yeah,
yeah
But but he's saying like they don't even have super egos. Like how are they?
yeah
They're
yeah
not going to go fight. And today, Britain, there was a paper in Britain that published that only 35% of British men said that they would die for Britain.
yeah that's abysmal
Right, and I
yeah
think his article is kind of supported. His article is supported by the article from the British press that I saw today. So yeah, but
I mean, I'd hate
you
to
know,
say it.
and
I don't know how much that number matters after Ukraine when we've seen the black vanning mechanism they've developed.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I saw a
um
video of a guy on the roof of his house in the Lvov region, and like literally one of these asshole TCC guys also climbed up on top of the roof to drag him, and they both fell off. But they I think they got him. The guy did end up walking away, but there's no way he could run after that fall. Now, it's not a big fall, like maybe 10 feet, but
Yeah, it's still enough to do it.
yeah
yeah,
But on that note, I do want to say in regard to the TCC, I don't want to dwell on this forever because I know we have plenty more to cover. Is that while there has been, and I've said this is a point I made before, while there has been resistance against them, understandably and rightfully so across Ukraine, I can never give enough credit to the city of Odessa and the people there when it comes to just being the example of what it looks like to resist the TCC, and that
yeah,
uh, that city, it might be a bold claim, but out of everything in this war, that city has gone through absolute hell, and like regardless of what one wants to think about the war or anything like that, considering what the civilian population has had to go through from all the second and third order effects of this war, including the pervasive presence of the TCC, I cannot commend them enough. And
yeah,
I mean, if any city deserves liberation, it's Odessa.
yeah. And
mm,
you know, there were five TCCs, including one former Soviet general who, out of retirement, this guy was in the I forget his name. He was in the Olympics at Lake Placid. Um, anyways, he's Ukrainian, but he joined the TCC and he was killed in broad daylight on the street with a guy holding a knife. I don't know if it was about what he did, but you know, in some of the cities, like in I think in Kiev, another one in one of the other towns, I forget where, about a week or two ago, there was a guy a week ago. A guy went crazy and just shot regular folks. So he killed like six elderly people. Another city had one guy who lost it for again military, like not at the front. Maybe he's just too damaged, and that's why he's back. But you have these events happening, and the thing, I'm glad you brought up Odessa, because I thought, like, if they have to, like, literally climb on someone's roof to get him to the front line in Lvov, and because it's easier to do it there than Odessa, then that's saying something.
Oh yeah.
Mm.
And while I do think a lot of the manpower grabbing, shifting west is a result of the fact that they're exhausting the eastern manpower, I do think because of Odessa and just all throughout the, I guess, central and eastern parts of Ukraine, resistance has solidified. And I'm not saying it's organized, I'm not saying it's anything that's going to collapse the Ukrainian state. But point being is most of these clips that you see of these organized town efforts where the entire town descends on the TCC officer for trying to black van one guy, these are places in central and eastern Ukraine where this is happening. Which is why you see them starting to do this in parts of western Ukraine you thought you'd never see them do it in. Not because it's necessarily a question of numbers, but numbers they can actually grab. And that's also not counting the men who literally spend every waking hour in hiding. And you look at the economic consequences of that. Ukraine's economy is already languishing enough from everything else, but they have effectively destroyed their workforce. And then the men who do have jobs are usually working under the table because they don't want any documentation of anywhere that they could be found. So taxes aren't getting paid to the government. It is a completely upside down system. And just to continue on the point, anyone who wants to tell you that Russia's conscription system is at all similar has no idea what they're talking about. The worst that the Russians do are they have the infrastructure. I will admit they do this. They had the men who come in for their mandatory service. I think it's 12 months at this point. And over those 12 months, just by proximity, they're able to strong arm a lot of these guys. Usually not through like literal strong arm, but they're usually able to convince a lot of these guys who are in the thick of it, like, oh, wouldn't it be great? Think about that guy you knew who came back from Ukraine, and you could be just like him. And that's what a lot of the Russian recruitment effort is. And of course, also very generous benefits have drawn in a number of people you thought would have never enlisted. And that's why you have all these people from these wayward ethnic groups from Siberia or just these small mountain towns you've never heard of. But anyone who wants to tell you there's any sort of equivalency between the recruitment system in Ukraine and Russia, like I said, simply has no idea what they're talking about.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
And it must be mentioned, just as the article by Emanuel Todd makes clear, he's implying that the Russians and the Ukrainians still have super egos, and that's why they can fight like this.
Oh, absolutely.
Well,
Yeah.
what does the West focus on? Oh yeah, how many men did you lose? Right. It's firmly entrenched in
It's a machinic process. Yeah.
It's firmly entrenched in economies and in tangible numbers, and the one that loses the most loses the war.
Yeah, just look at
Because
Afghanistan.
it has an issue
Or Vietnam.
with the super ego and sacrifice, right?
I suppose on that note, we should shift over to Iran and the happening or lack thereof in the region and try to make sense of what's really going on. And I'll give the floor to my co-host, to my guest right here, because I feel like they're going to have some insightful takes on this with some of the things we've been discussing just in the past couple weeks.
Mm-hmm.
This really is a Bojerian war. I don't even know what's happening.
It's all fake. No.
Yeah. The Iranian war never happened.
It's all Shabbat Lubavitch.
It's Thursday. It's all Shabbat Lubavitch, yeah.
On both sides.
Well, you go, Gio. We've hogged the mic, the proverbial mic, long enough. Why don't you go?
I don't. Well, I mentioned that because I really don't know what's going on in the sense that I can't really trust anything, because on the one end, Trump the other day seemed conciliatory like he extended the deadline to Sunday, which I mean,
Yeah.
if you're winning the war, why would you extend the deadline to Sunday? But then he also threatened to blow up ships in the strait,
Yeah.
and they're having a hell of a time sending minesweepers in there. Either
Because Europe needs
because
to step up.
yeah, Europe needs to step up, even though, I think per capita, America has like some of the Americans and the British, I believe, have some of the most minesweeping capabilities in terms of sea mines in the world. So there was one guy that got like bit by a monkey, a minesweeper, and they're like transporting him, but so it's a very weird
Bit by
situation.
a monkey.
Yeah, he was bit by a monkey, and
This show
he's
is
got
wild, you know that?
yeah.
And it gets wilder when you're on
Oh
it. Bit
man.
by...
So I don't know if there is. I mean, I think the Japanese, they've managed to buy, I believe, 5 million barrels, which will last them not even a month. Uh, there is like a bunch of deals going on, but now that there are some ships going through, and this is when Trump decides to, I guess because the markets are closing, Trump decides to threaten bombing ships, and you can't really tell what's going to happen after Sunday, or he's just going to keep extending it forever. Sort of like how I mean, Constantine, is the American budget is I mean, in Canada we call it prorogue parliament, but like is that what happened with the budget? Did they pass a budget, or is that still going on? Like nobody
As far as
cares?
I know, they're kicking the can down the road with that, and that's been a lot of the problems with the quote unquote partial government shutdown, with the slowdowns, the
Yeah,
TSA, all that kind of stuff, where things aren't getting funded, so
nobody
just
cares.
select
Yeah.
sectors are getting shut down.
And
And
then like they're looting stable coins now, apparently. They're
oh, of
looting
course,
people's wallets. And they had some like token, I don't think he even was a colonel. He was just like some officer that they pegged for insider trading over the Venezuela fiasco. And they're like throwing him in jail, even though everybody's doing it. Like every administration, since at least Vietnam has been doing that.
look,
So
I think we got it wrong. I think our government is actually run by a different, small kleptocratic minority, also found in Europe, particularly Romania.
maybe.
Instead,
Yeah,
instead
could
of the
be.
ones that were mostly found in Poland before the war. But I'm getting off topic here. But in regards to the war, something that that floored me, that I thought was hilarious but also extremely accurate. It was an interview that Daniel Davis was doing with Douglas McGregor, and it
Oh,
was
I saw pids of that interview. It's
it was
going
towards the
around.
tail end of it, and he was describing the situation of the ceasefire. He said that Trump pretty much burnt down half the house and put it out, and expects thanks for it. But then somebody handed him back the box of matches, saying, "Here, you can burn down the rest of it if you want."
That's brilliant.
Oh my god. There's just no, but the point being is that I mean, maybe you would know more GSP. Like, there's
Mm.
just to me a sense of overall ambiguity with what's going to happen this Sunday or next week, or
Yeah, I think
yeah,
I don't think he knows any other strategy than the ambiguity strategy. Now, we all know he part of this is market manipulation. There are friends who benefit from this. Um, when you look at, I mean, even Zelensky was interviewed while he was in, you know, in Saudi Arabia. Remember that visit where
the world tour. Yeah.
he went to Saudi Arabia needs my help.
The drone expert.
So does yeah, the turn
Yeah.
expert. But he did mention something that I think is undeniably true, and he and other geopolitical channels have pointed this out. History Legend, which is always very factual, mentioned it as well. America, in the first 48 hours, for some of its interceptors, blew through 3 years of production.
Phew,
Right?
boy, that's.
Right?
I knew it was
Like,
bad. I didn't realize it was quite that bad.
yes. And so one of the reasons they don't want to restart this war is because of that. Now, every day or every other day, Israel is saying they're ready to resume the war. They're making these public statements, which I'm sure are there to pressure Trump. And, if we're talking about pressuring Trump, and Colonel McGregor. The other thing that he said was, because he went off on Berletic. It wasn't Dialogue Works.
It was neutrality studies.
It was Neutrality Studies. Yeah.
That one Swiss guy who
Yeah,
does
the
all the
Swiss guy.
interviews.
His last name, what is it, Matt? Or
He doesn't have a
Yeah.
Swiss name, but he is Swiss.
Oh,
He
but
is
also
Swiss.
keep in mind that I'm reading some of these people that follow it closely, like Barry with NED on Twitter. Apparently, even during this other ceasefire, the Israelis are still bulldozing places in Lebanon, and the Hezbollah is actually struck.
Lebanon is a whole different topic. We'll get into that.
Yeah, and so Trump is saying we're going to help liberate Lebanon from the Hezbollah, and he's apparently floating. Trump announces that the ceasefire, quote unquote, will be extended by 3 weeks. 3 weeks, Lebanon ceasefire. I look forward to the near future hosting the Prime Minister of Israel, Bibi Netanyahu, and the President of Lebanon. And great honor to be participant in this historic meeting. So, but apparently the Hezbollah has struck a number of bulldozers that were operating in certain
and
towns.
tanks.
And tanks.
I mean, that's why they're trying to pressure the Lebanese government by destroying Christian villages into fighting Hezbollah. Wait, I thought you destroyed Hezbollah.
Yeah.
I thought everybody last year in 2024. I thought the news was Hezbollah was totally destroyed.
But they got Israel. Yeah. The pagers.
The pagers
totally destroyed. Where do they come from? Like, and we said they're not destroyed. Like,
I mean, they actually recovered.
People are
far quicker than I thought they would.
Yeah.
That was a take that.
You know what? Yeah. They have very big super egos. Probably the biggest.
Oh man, the point about the super ego reminds me of what Academic Agent said recently. How, for example, they didn't even read the terms that Tehran gave them. That they didn't know that Lebanon was part of the ceasefire agreement.
Oh, but baloney, yeah.
And so the point being is that the Americans, they do have this notion that, or let's say the Western powers, they have this notion that there's a procedure and we dictate terms, and everybody else sort of their concerns and their negotiations and their geopolitical position isn't quote unquote real compared to ours. And their concerns are nothing. It's like children lashing out, but we are the real adults of the world. But he's like, that doesn't really apply when you're talking about, for example, China and Xi Jinping, or even in this case, Iran, because they control such a massive artery of the world economy. And so that cavalier attitude toward, and you saw this during Iraq and Afghanistan, there was a number of things that happened in Pakistan, in terms of negotiation, where all these neocon ghouls fucking Richard Pearl and Gonzalez and all of them, they just totally disregarded anything that the other parties were saying, including Ahmadinejad. And so you have this attitude where, well, everything else is not real, but we're the only real ones. And that's it.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because if we're going to talk about the Ziofication of America, and essentially that's what McGregor was talking about in neutrality studies. He mentioned has Berletic actually been to Washington lately? Israel and the AIPAC literally brag about how every politician except for 2 or 3 have a Jewish handler.
Well, what I did appreciate that
if you don't do what we want to do, we'll pay your competitor and he'll win. I mean, we all saw the articles in the last 2-3 years. 90% of all the candidates that we funded won. I mean, you can't gloss over stuff like this. Now, we've said on the show that it's a joint thing, but most definitely part of the reason it's a joint thing, because there's something else that we mentioned, is because the people steering America,
the diaspora,
a lot of them are dual citizens of Israel. What's that?
The diaspora has a soft spot for its homeland.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Almost none of them will join the U.S. military, but you see how many of them have that Hezbollah and Hamas have killed, in Israel and in
That have
Lebanon.
American passports. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm glad you brought up Cheney and all the not Cheney, sorry, Richard Pearl and all the ghouls and Wolfowitz.
Yeah.
Because the thing is when the Soviet Union fell, that is when they said we are now that communism is over.
Yeah.
This is where we have to begin the process of a new
Project of the new
century.
American
Oh wait,
century.
not Israeli. I meant America. I meant American. New American century, not an Israel.
Not the Greater Israel Project. What's that?
Right. Yeah. So you can see that's when it took off, and Clinton, even though like Trump, he was getting BJs from a Jewish woman.
Many such cases.
Many such cases still didn't give them everything they wanted. So the Zionification of America, right? In its zero religious state, as it were, to use another Todism. But you can see that it was a long process, and they just waited for second term Trump to appear. Not that the other guys in small incremental steps didn't give them what they wanted,
but Trump.
But there was always with Trump, and almost anything is possible.
Especially after
we can literally just do things. Yeah.
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 After the trouble he went through from 2021 to 2024, he was putty in their hands. And I've talked about this before. That combined with his mental faculties slipping has been the perfect combination for them. Because his first term, he had a lot of fight in him, where they're like, "Sir, bomb Iran. You'll be great. We'll liberate Iran." He's like, I don't think so.
Kill Soleimani? Okay. Bomb and bomb Iran. Don't stop.
No, you only get one. You only get one.
But, yeah, that's right.
But
I gotta work on my vaccine.
He was it started the deal.
He was still stubborn enough at that point to put up a fight when these people like Kushner or whoever whispered in his ear these ideas. Now that he's pushing 80, now that his mind's really starting to slip, especially since the outbreak of this war, he'll just do whatever they tell him. And that was something. I mean, look, when I said I voted for Trump the second time, when I tacitly recommended people do the same, I said so with the large caveat that this is probably not going to work. This is probably not going to do anything. And I think given the information at the time, I stand by what I said. There was a non-0% chance something might have happened. But this was the likely outcome. I think we all knew it going in. But one of the big concerns I had almost immediately after the election was his victory speech. Now, I know it was 3 a.m., 4 a.m., whatever it was, but he sounded old. Older than he ever had at that point.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, his inauguration was better. He had the big blow-up with Zelensky within the first month in office, which was promising, but then it was just a steady stream of disappointment from there. But ever since then, and especially this year, especially after the start of this war, he's just been... He's a husk. This man barely has any life in him. And like I said, the more stress he undergoes, the worse it gets. To the point where, I think I have no quote-unquote professional base to be saying this, but I think Trump's mind is largely gone at this point. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's like Biden the rest of his term once they get him to finally shut up, if they can get the phone out of his hands, or perhaps long shot. I'm not saying I believe this will happen, but I think this is a possible trajectory. I think there are people who would like to see this happen. 25th Amendment, he's out. Vance is in. Vance also takes the heat for all this stuff. And that's not to defend Vance. I mean, he has his own agenda that I simply not trust. We'll read the Alex Karp thing in a little bit here. Don't worry.
Yeah.
But with that, he also takes the heat. And then whatever empty suit, let's just say Gavin Newsom for a placeholder, wins in 2028, and they get to go double down on Rainbow Empire.
Yeah.
Can they?
In a way, they can. Not in the way that they used to.
Not 2010's wokeness way, but like in a certain way.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, they would have to be pretty anti-Zionist to get the young people.
I mean, I
Yeah.
think they could. Let me put it this way, and I'm not saying this as a guarantee, but I could see a model
You know who
where
loves trans kids? Israel,
oh, exactly. Who makes all the HRT?
not Iran.
Uh,
But on that point, I could see a sort of Cold War arrangement with Israel where we make sure they don't get wiped off the map, but we also have certain things we'll say no about.
Hmm.
And I mean, I think unless Israel is going to really suffer the curse of the eighth decade, that's probably the only viable option going forward for an American-Israeli relationship. And even the diaspora will realize, even a lot of the Israeli elite will realize, and Likud is probably not long for this world as a viable political movement. I don't think they're going to survive this war, which is part of the reason I think Netanyahu is pushing this. I mean, look at his political prospects before this war broke out. There were clashes in the street. There were calls for his imprisonment, judicial coups, all of it. And that was just months before the October 7th war. So clearly there's enough ground for change in Israel to the point where I think they could be reined in, still have a massive lobby, still get everything they need, but they'll have to give up on the maximalist goals. And that's what I foresee. And like, this is all long-term projection. So many things can change in the next few years. But on the timeline I've built, rough timeline, don't take it as gospel or anything, that is a scenario I could plausibly see happening.
mm.
And you see, that is pessimistic because it's not the curse of the eighth decade, but what are you going to do?
Wait, what? Repeat the last part.
I said, and that is pessimistic on my part because it's not.
No, but like, what do you think is going to happen? The last part you said there, the prediction.
I think that with the general prediction, Democrat empty suit manages to sweep 2028, whether it's Trump still in power or some transitional government, say Vance or whatever, and Israel gets put on a leash. They're still one of the crown jewels of the empire, so to speak, but they don't get their maximalist goals.
The Obama arrangement, in other words.
More or less.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot can happen in 3 years if the whole thing in Iran cools down at
It's
that
like,
time.
we'll bomb Syria for you, but not Iran.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
speaking of strategy, I sent you guys a little graph. Now, there appears these estimates are from the International Energy Study, China National Bureau of Statistics, Vorteca Analytics, Kairos, Kepler, Argus Media, and Global Trade Tracker. So there's several, uh, um, agencies that have contributed to this. And this is as of December 2025, and we know in January and February, China doubled its amount of oil that it normally took for those months from Russia. Um, just take a look at the estimates for the millions of barrels that China has in storage right now. It is more than the U.S., Japan, Europe, and maybe even Saudi Arabia combined. Uh, like, I mean, I think they're ready for a big outcome. You know, if the war goes really dire, and this for Iran, let's say, uh, it's plausible even the Chinese could send in oil one way or another, like back to Russia. Russia brings it in through the Caspian. If it comes down to that point. Now,
All
there
being said,
was
it's more severe than it was in 2022, but we saw China do a similar thing where it became a kingmaker in the oil market after the Russian sanctions because it would buy Russian oil, it would sell it third party, and I
yes,
think
and they've done that with gas as well.
yeah, and I think we're seeing a similar arrangement right now. They're getting as much as they can from the Iranians, and they're going to play kingmaker with the energy market after that because that is something they're able to do and is the most rational thing to do in their position.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I guess I brought it up because you can see the kind of long game that that the Chinese are willing to play here. Now, um, one of the other things, which one was it? There was a spokeswoman for the Trump administration that today said, yes, in fact, we we are here to interdict the Chinese the Chinese ability to get oil. They are serious about that, which I think most people can tell.
Oh, I mean,
I'm
they've
I'm
committed to it.
floundering here because I'm trying to find it, and I know I sent it to you, but
Yeah,
I can't
I
see
know
it.
which one you're talking about. And
You know which one, yeah.
while you look for that, I'll just say, now that they've committed to open hostility with Iran, even if they want this indefinite ceasefire, it logically follows that in order to enforce their own sanctions regime, in order to complete their quote unquote mission, they do have to start interdicting vessels on the high seas, which is something I hate to brag, but we said all the way back in 2019, 2020 that soon the American Navy will become the world's largest pirate organization. Because that was the only logical conclusion to the current leadership class in Washington, Trump included, but not Trump exclusively, I will say, losing its grasp on power. Rather than try to reorient to something more manageable, reorient to something more sustainable, even if it does involve cutting back some of the excess or a great deal of the excess, they're forced to double and triple down on these policies. But they're
Hmm.
now in a real damned if you do, damned if you don't situation because, as we've seen with the engagement with Iran, they simply do not have the material to make this war happen. They run through the anti air missiles too quickly. They run
Yes,
through the standoff
yes.
munitions too quickly. Where every strategic sign of the administration points towards regime change in Iran, but all of the logistical signs point towards there's no way this is even going to be possible, and just give up now, which means Trump's quote unquote campaign of maximum pressure, which certainly had its issues, and I'm not going to condone in the slightest, was something of an effective policy where it did keep the Iranians boxed in somewhat enough to manage, enough to make the Gulf states and Israel feel, maybe not so much Israel, but enough to make the Gulf states feel comfortable, enough to keep Israeli kvetching at bay for a time being at least. And now they have walked themselves in a situation where they have proven themselves weaker than the world thought they were, and the Iranians stronger than the world thought they were. And the Iranians can make demands. What started out as an attempt at regime change, status quo right now, I know there are things disputed as we speak, ended up with the Iranians charging $2 million toll a ship on the Strait of Hormuz. Yeah, sure, they'll share with Oman, whatever. But point being is, you took what was one of the most vital trade arteries in the world that was open to international commerce, and you turned it into an Iranian toll booth. And you gave them every reason to. And this is what we have to cope with right now. And I will say, in terms of Trump versus the deep state, because I know that's been a big debate, did Trump go off the proverbial plantation here in order to wage this war? In a sense, yes. I think what they let me clarify my position. What I think happened with that is if Trump could do it, they would give him the nice pat on the back, say, "Great job, Donald. You did our dirty work for us." But they knew it would probably fail. They anticipated it. So, what better man to have tried than Donald Trump? Because he's easy to throw under the bus if this
Yes.
fails. It
He
likely
has
will
very little
fail.
left to lose
Yeah,
as well.
we need this
Yeah.
to succeed, so we're going to put the least popular man in charge to do it. So, when it probably fails, none of us will take the blame.
And
But
in
also,
and in
oh
no
yeah,
small measure, his desire to reverse the actual election that was stolen from him would make him just as complicit to whatever it was that they wanted. You know, there's anything that's damning in the Epstein files, which everyone has nearly forgotten at this point. But
mm,
Wait,
um,
the what?
he was
the
putty in their
who?
hands at that point. The Epstein Empire, I do like that.
I love how like that one professor in Iran keeps bringing up the Epstein Empire. It's just, but no, I think like another thing is the narrative that it's always like the narrative of like, well, we have a hand tied behind our back, right? Like if it's not,
oh, we're just not trying hard enough.
Yeah, exactly. There's no such thing as material limitations when it comes to America, when it comes to the Western world in general. And so, therefore, there must be some other intangible thing that's preventing Trump from quote unquote going all the way. But when you've like murdered the Ayatollah, that kind of is going all the way. That kind of is like a commitment beyond anything. And so, therefore, if it's not material conditions that have allowed you to languish in a space of ambiguity when it comes to foreign policy over one of the most vital trade routes in the world, then it's obviously podcasters. This is the narrative they're going with. Podcasters that have, like, you know, somehow forwarded American interests.
I'm sorry, guys, we ruined it for everyone.
But then, like, Trump has padded his administration. I think it was Stormy, or was it even Orrin McIntyre that was talking about, like, well, you know, Trump has per capita more podcasters in his administration than anybody in Talking Heads. And a lot of them have quit, like Dan Bongino. So it's like these podcasters are evil and they're thwarting his plans. Or it's, you know, these podcasters know what they're doing. It's like, it's vibes. It's like people say that, oh, well, you're just going off of vibes and, you know, you're a third worldist, blah, blah, blah. But for example, there was this, I forget who you were referring to, GSP, but I remember you said, I remember distinctly, it was like a few months ago, you were like, this fucking piece of shit. Just pieces of shit.
That sounds like me.
Yeah. So there is these delicious tweets by Will Chamberlain, and this could lead into the SPLC nonsense. But he said, let me pull it up. He said, so your plan is to, so he's replying to, I forget who he's replying to. I think it was Orrin, actually, or somebody else who's doubting the plan. So your plan's to give up a war that we're winning? We're winning. Withdraw ships that aren't seriously threatened by the Iranians. Leave Iran and control the Strait of Hormuz, blow up our relationship with our Gulf allies, and accomplish what exactly? Okay, so let's break this down. Winning, Iran's not a serious threat, although we've seen footage recently that they still have an operational navy of sea boats that actually are very hard to target and are very easy to sink ships, and that you're forsaking the allies in the region, to which you've also treated like a fucking cum rag piece of shit that you don't care about, because you only care about really one ally in the region. So where's this winning? But I guess it's like Tucker Carlson is like making sure that America's not winning. So, but the reason I bring this up is because of the absolute absurdity of this, in the sense that the American government and Trump's cabinet and people behind that cabinet that are setting policy in motion, they have obviously a clear agenda that they're operating under. And people within the base, or formerly within the base, who don't have that same agenda, they kind of are not pulling the strings, because it's not Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, and, well, I guess Joe Kent was there at the time, but he promptly quit, where they're not the ones pressing the buttons that lead to the death of the Ayatollah and Iranian schoolgirls and seriously threatening the stability of the global economy over the Strait of Hormuz and regime change in Iran, which has been a conscious plan for the better part of, well, I mean, since Ayatollah Khomeini was in there in the 80s. So you really can't account for the way that the politics of empire operate in Washington, in London, and elsewhere. You can't really say that, well, okay, we know that one side is autonomous, but they're still having their hands tied behind their back by another power. or another rival elite, or it's like, again, endless copes towards this thing. But you've gone into the war, and the same people will argue that, well, okay, now that we're into it, even though we were conned into it, quote unquote, I seriously doubt that, actually. I mean, Trump was pretty willing to do it. I mean, he has publicly stated since the 80s that he's, disliked the Iranian regime.
Yeah, that was
But
one of the big pitfalls going even his first term, where despite everything else he was hawkish on Iran. Now, as we saw in his first term, that didn't necessarily translate to appreciable military action. Soleimani aside, not justifying that by any means, but it was the biggest risk.
Yeah, and then I'll mention about Will Chamberlain during the the whole thing with the fucking
I forget
SPLC.
these people exist, and then you come on my show. We'd love to have you here, but you always you know what? I almost enjoy it.
Yeah, so we'll talk about it later, but I'll save my venom for when we do talk about it. But that's the thing. I mean, you really can't. You again, this is a misappropriation of how power and politics actually works on the stage of empire, the politics of empire itself, as opposed to the very personable politics of Trump the man and influencers and public opinion. So you want this sort of like NRX reactionary fantasy where you can just say, okay, we're going to step over it and who cares? We're not really going to question like who this benefits and what lobbyist and what sort of particular arrangement of political power is benefiting from this. But the fact that we're in it proves that we're in it to win, and we have to just go through it. And we have to step over it, and no longer will America have their hands tied behind their back in a protracted war against a quote-unquote lesser enemy, right? But then you're saying that, well, we can't do that because that like NRX fantasy rightoid coalition is also being hamstrung by influencers and podcasters that aren't trusting the plan.
Because they're getting paid off by Qatar.
Yeah. And so you can't, but then you're saying that, okay, but we want this imperial, like actual American imperialism, like actual, like what did Yarvin call it? Formalism in political power. We're going to actually do it. We're going to actually conquer the world. Palantir controls all, sees all, knows all, according to Matt Forney. And so we're actually just going to do these things. We're actually just going to do things. But then we're also now being held with a hand behind the American empire has its hand held, tied behind its back.
I can't do things because Joe can't quit.
Yeah. So, but then when it comes to like stating the actual goals of what's happening after almost 2 months in Iran, then you're saying like there's going to be negotiation, but then if you're not trusting that the negotiations are going to work, but America's still winning, again, you can't, it's just a fucking Bojangirdian war. And so maybe it's because I'm just a Canadian and a third worldist and Islam, whatever, but it's just, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And then when you do question it, you're getting drowned out with a wall of sound by people that say that the mere act of questioning is a betrayal of the past 10 years of political capital. But what was that political capital on the political right in America? Was it really built up for the heritage American, for the like based and red-pilled coalition of we're gonna become an actual nation, an actual civilization?
Well, it's okay because we took the Faustian bargain of giving Israel what it wants, so we get our base policy at home. 2 news stories from today. Right. DHS tames mass deportation efforts by rolling back some ICE policies. And number 2, Trump signs order to reclassify medical marijuana as a less dangerous drug, shifting license from schedule.
Yeah, but that's Joe Rogan. That's
you see, we took the Faustian bargain, but at least we got our base policy.
Yeah, and so no, but that's what I mean. Like you have to seriously. Well, even Orrin McIntyre said it was an interview between Joe Kent on the Piers Morgan show with Alan Dershowitz, who said, I switched from Democrat Party to Republican. I'm becoming a foreign policy Republican. I'm still a domestic Democrat. And
Oh
then
God.
Warren McIntyre says if people are literally becoming classic neocons due to the administration's foreign policy, that's probably not that great. So, but
Yeah,
you're
I mean it's
questioning,
honestly like the elites in Europe.
yeah, yeah, expand upon that. But but that's a
Well,
great connection. Yeah, yeah,
I mean, they have this internally. They it's about personal emancipation. You know, like in this case, through marijuana. But I still think Russia and China should be conquered.
Yeah, who was that
Um,
Finnish woman who lost power? Before, the one before Alexander Stubb, or was she prime minister? Because Stubb's president.
yeah, Morin or something.
Yeah, fitting
yeah.
name by the way. Who was the TikTok dancer prime minister?
Yeah, she was dancing with this guy. She's married and she's at a party. She's doing coke. That's what I mean.
Yeah, do
That's
that and then
that.
join NATO to set up a forward operation base against Russia.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's exactly what you're describing.
yeah, they have the same ambitions, but they are completely different people. Like like the article says, like Todd's article basically says, it was the upper middle classes who wanted to conquer and push forward, and they were the leaders. That impulse is still there, but these are totally different people, right? They're not like they're just they're just too selfish and too degenerate, and they've alienated their. I mean, one of the pillars of this show was waiting for that moment when Europe and the West would need to fight a major existential war, not like Iraq and Libya and starving Syria out and funding fucking Al Qaeda and ISIS to do their dirty work for them, but the real thing,
Yeah.
right? And now that's where we are. And nobody wants to fight for this gay empire.
I suppose, unless you guys have any final thoughts, GSP or comment there perfectly describes Alex Karp's new manifesto.
Yeah.
Oh my
Here's how the
god.
gay empire can win, and why it should.
Okay, so I will go ahead and send this to you guys, and I'll get the thing up on screen right now. So I'll send it to the group chat here if you guys would like to follow along on the reading. I'm just gonna skip down to the points. I'm gonna skip the preamble here. One.
Oh, you didn't record my quip about Atelier Mansour building like kitschy Promethean statues.
Everything
That's gonna
is
solve
recorded.
everything.
Well, don't worry. We'll
Okay,
burn
good.
that bridge when we get to it.
No, but like, yeah, the emotional. But yeah, so go ahead. I saved my take from DA to do the Palantir thing on the war report. So
Okay, so like I said, we're gonna skip the preamble, and this is from Business Insider. It's the best source I could find that just concisely had all the points. So stop me at any point as I go through these. I'll add commentary when I see fit. Number one,
Okay.
Silicon Valley owes a moral debt to the country that made its rise possible. The engineering elite of Silicon Valley has an affirmative obligation to participate in the defense of the nation.
This is debt repayment. It's
I also like the implication that this
we
hasn't
owe
been
it to you,
happening
folks.
for decades now, that Silicon Valley wasn't born out of the Pentagon and out of the American state apparatus, and that they haven't been collaborating since the 1950s. And I know that Silicon Valley in of itself doesn't quite date back that far, but still the principle of it. Number two, we must rebel against the tyranny of the apps. Does that mean we're shutting down the H-1B program? I hope that's what it means. Is the iPhone our greatest creative, if not crowning achievement as a civilization? The object has changed our lives, but it may also be limiting and constraining our sense of the possible. Very unique take. I've never heard that one before.
well,
Free email is not enough. The decadence of a culture, civilization, indeed its ruling class, will be forgiven only if that culture is capable of delivering economic growth and security for the public. What a non-statement! Like what's
It is insane. The whole thing is bribery.
yeah.
it's catnip.
Like
Really, it's reactionary catnip.
it is so late stage empire.
Yeah.
It is so hollowed out. Like I mean, to some extent, he knows his population, right? its population is teetering right now. Part of it is thinking, if we lose this war against Iran, if we don't nuke Iran, the consequences for us can be very, very bad. Our reputation will be mud, right? And he's trying to reinvigorate this with like a line like "free email is not enough." The decadence of a culture. What?
Oh,
What
and
is
also
he?
a national draft.
Oh, don't
So
worry,
he's
don't worry.
gonna
We'll
take
get
We're
care
to
of
gonna
that.
get to
decadence.
that one.
You know what? You know how to get rid of decadence? More profit.
No, but read the first part about the Silicon Valley debt to America.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously they're
It's not
thinking.
benefiting Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is paying it back.
Yeah. I mean, obviously they're thinking about the
This
Chinese
is
there.
insane.
Like they're thinking about the
This is-
Chinese, and yeah. Go ahead, GSP.
No,
Yeah,
nobody
yeah.
should ever buy a Huawei phone. I'm just gonna go on record and say that. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
I think no, but here's the problem with all of this. Okay, like that very first point. Now, you're a lot of people, and I know the immediate response will be like, "You're fucking leaf. You're Canadian. You live in a post-national, like postmodern bedroom community, economic
like America
zone."
does it.
America doesn't, right? So no, but here's the thing, though. If you look at the later points that Constantine's going to read, a lot of it is about we're going to go a little bit in the way of American identity without making it too explicit, because people underneath Peter Thiel are doing the job of making it explicit, only in racial terms, and only against like the global browning, not anything else, though. That's the game, right? Because they don't have to, like Alex Karp and Peter Thiel, they don't have to say it explicitly, because there's cadres underneath them that will say it explicitly.
Right.
Right? But the problem is, though, is that, and I'm not saying this out of like glee or hatred or like a resentful Canadian or whatever, but I'm just stating like what you can even read, like left wingers and even right wingers back in the day that would say this. Even someone like Curtis Yarvin would say this, that there is like the postmodern economic bedroom zone, like world port that is current day American empire, right? That, okay, yes, Canada is like an ultra reified example because our elites, the Laurentian elites, celebrate that lack of identity, or at least they did. But now Carney's giving a little bit of catnip to other people, right, about the Canadian heritage and so on and so forth. But the point being is that in terms of elite politics, right, in terms of even just the phenomenological and existential shape of living in current day North America, let's say, there is that reality of like postmodern nowhere land, the desert, as Baudrillard called it in his travelogue of America. And, to then say that, well, okay, that's obviously Peter Thiel recognizing that as a problem, right? But to then go and say that we're unique people and you're not in Europe and Canada, you're not in Canada, and you're not in Australia, that is a way of affirming a very like surface level kitschified version of what Americana is that can be easily weaponized against the interests of actual Americans. And that is the danger with someone like Peter Thiel. And
As
so
always
when,
happens.
as always happens, and no, but that's my second point, Constantine. So Silicon Valley has obviously benefited from this like global princeling, globalization, jet setter class that doesn't have any ties or loyalty to like the homeland, let's say. But then Peter Thiel is going to come along and say, well, actually, Silicon Valley should have loyalty to the homeland, which is fine, which is admirable, right? But then you see all the other stuff he says in the manifesto, and it severely questions, okay, if Silicon Valley, if the geniuses in Silicon Valley knew that it was a problem turning America and the rest of the Western world into a postmodern non-place, that eventually the Grim Reaper is going to come, the bill will be paid in having a mass apathetic, racially heterogeneous, culturally heterogeneous, semi-nihilistic population filled with ennui and purposelessness and rootless consumption and so on and so forth. All the stuff that people have been talking about since the 19th century, right? If they knew that that was a problem to begin with, then why wasn't there a verve of like nationalistic pride the way there was with, say, the space program in the 60s. Because obviously the people most benefit of that postmodern nowhere land, the hypermodern is probably a better term, hypermodern nowhere land. People that mostly benefit from it for so many generations, for so many decades in Silicon Valley, now all of a sudden are going to switch their tune and say that, no, actually, we do have a debt to a nation. But how come when it comes to massive elite power structures in the modern world, maybe not so much in the ancient regime, maybe not so much in antiquity, but in terms of like the globalized modern world, where the incentives to be this rootless billionaire class, jet setter, no attachment to anything, why all of a sudden we know the trend? And I know it's like people would say it's a midwit take, but it's true, right? Previous behavior is a good indicator of future behavior. Well, they all of a sudden have their Saul and Damascus come to Jesus moment. Now. Why now?
I'll tell you why. Because globalization failed.
Right. Yeah.
And they think that a momentary, like, I remember Joel
An
Davies.
injection of nationalism, let's
like,
call it an injection of nationalism, yeah.
Yeah, I remember Joel Davies back in 2020, maybe it was 2021. He was doing a podcast with someone else, and they were talking about, you know, Red Empire, Blue Empire, the empire that has you know, its nodes of power everywhere, not just in America but everywhere, and therefore those are its interests.
Yeah.
And then there's the other one, the Red Empire, which are firmly here, you know, borders, etc.
I think he was with Keith Woods when he did that, yeah.
Yes, you're right. And so I think the Ukraine war and the other, you know, the Iran war essentially prove like they haven't achieved what they wanted. And they think that if you know, this is Silicon Valley being patriotic. Like, but they will, like, when they say, you know, we want to conquer the, you know, this is what we have to do to save America. And but all of them and their followers want America to rule the world. They just
trust me,
feel...
we'll get into that. I'll go over the points because you guys are preempting a lot of them,
Okay, let's go through the points. You're right.
Because
sorry.
A lot of what you say will connect later. So point number 4, the limits of soft power of storing rhetoric alone have been exposed. The ability of free and democratic societies to prevail requires something more than appeal. It requires hard power, and hard power in this century will be built on software.
This is NRX slop right here. This is the most
it
low
really
grade
is.
version of NRX. Yeah,
This is you know, tell me that America no longer captivates people's imaginations the way it used to without telling me that.
Even like, you know, now I remember this is what Landshark said when they released Victor Boot, where like he's like that Brittany Grimes person is like hating her own country or his whatever, its own country, and like saying it's terrible, even though they're like bending over backwards to like release one of the most prolific arms dealers in world history. But yet Victor Boot is like in a jail cell lamenting over the state. He's like, oh, I remember when I used to come to America and it was masculine and fun and nice. It's like, I love America. You know, like it's yeah.
They want a reversal. This is part of the whole we're gonna put the woke away kind of.
Yeah, don't
Go ahead.
worry. It's gonna be based rainbows this time around. The question of whether or not AI weapons will be built, it is a question of who will build them and for what purpose. Our adversaries,
not the Chinese. Yeah,
our adversaries will not pause to indulge in theatrical debates about the merits of developing technologies with critical military and national security applications. They will proceed. See, Russia and China are building hypersonic missiles. They're building drones. And Alex Karp and Peter Thiel want to invest billions, if not trillions, into AI boondoggles that will not counter either of those.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying the Russians and Chinese don't do their own AI research, don't get me wrong. But point being is, this is just more like of a messianic view of AI. It's like, oh, it's going to fix everything. It's going to build the weapons. It's going to run the industries. And if we just give the chat bot enough Jews, it'll do what we want.
I'm still trying to figure out how he's paying America back for all the prosperity it gave.
Oh,
gave
don't
him
worry.
for-
Here's he'll get to that in point 6 right
Go
here.
on. Yeah.
National service will be should be a universal duty. We should, as a society, consider moving away from an all-volunteer force and only fight the next war if everyone shares the risk and the cost. I mean,
Against who? China?
yeah.
Is that the next one?
They can't even invade Iran. Oh yeah, China. Oh my god.
I mean, what's
delusional.
What's the play
No,
here?
but don't you
Give every
understand? Tucker
military
Carlson made sure they couldn't invade Iran properly.
No, yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know, like
I
the
can't
U.S.
believe-
military versus a podcaster.
Well, Tucker is pretty powerful, but that's
Yeah,
it's true,
Ayatollah
true.
Takarani. Yeah. I know.
The
Can,
next
can,
one,
can
I
you
love
can you imagine he converts to Shia Islam? I still love Jesus.
But I do.
No, but that's what I mean. Like the next war. Okay, what is the next war? Like, what's gonna be
And-
China?
And I
Oh,
love the
there's
idea
more?
that such a deeply fragmented society that no longer has a look. We talked about super egos. I would say America doesn't even have an ego at this point. People just don't know what it is. They don't know what they
I don't know
are.
what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah. Do you think that you're going to look at the youth demographics? Just look at the demographics of people 18 to 25. Are you going to marshal them into and regardless of what one thinks of World War II, are you going to marshal them into the kind of fighting force that won World War II? Like I said, regardless of what you think of our involvement in war, probably world-class fighting force, the best this country's ever going to do. You're not going to get that out of this next generation. That's not a finger wagging at the youth.
But here's the thing, Constantine.
That is a just objective take based on our demographic and political situation.
But here's the thing, though, Constantine. Like even barring their obsessions with Russia, right? At the same time you're doing this, you also have people that are very close to Thiel and Alex Karp in the administration who are also pouring like unreal levels of scorn at basically all of their European or European adjacent, to which I mean Kanzuk, although the Kanzuk thing is a disaster and that has a lot of problems. A lot of my friends in Canada, they talk about the problem of the Kanzuk thing. But like in terms of like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, blah, 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 right?
Yeah, the
Exo Europe. They're pouring unreal amounts of scorn. And so the people that constitute the more like quote unquote dissident right, who are becoming very amenable to Karp and Thiel, it's like they're saying that what they're doing is a metaphor for Western large like European civilization as a whole being ruling of the world in the way that the British did, right? But that's not like that goes against the actual interests that a lot of these people within the halls of power actually have. And it goes against, like you were saying, the demographic situation that is, not going to be addressed anytime soon. And also the world is fundamentally different. And so it just, to me, it seems like they're trying to appeal to one side of the coin, but their interests may or may not lie elsewhere. And then, of course, you have the equally retarded dialectic on the political left, which is to take on face value what the more like overt people, like the posters, actually say about this manifesto, and they go and run with it and say that, well, Palantir, they actually are like white nationalist, fascist, blah, 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 right? With ignoring the actual intricacies
Which
of that.
is why they bragged about defeating the European far right, but...
Yeah, and like, I gotta admit, even Dugin has like been pouring it this like kind of like slop thing, calling it like, my based agrarian fascism versus their like techno-capital fascism.
So true.
It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, No, but the point being is that like, I think the problem with Dugin is that he is willing to like, entertain and wade into that like parapolitical, more like left of like more like reactionary left, for lack of a better term, narrative. And so the problem is like when posters on the political right view what the left is saying about Alex Karp and Palantir, there's this instinctive like light switch brain that goes on that says, okay, I have to defend them because they're actually giving me a peon to what my values are. And therefore I have to pay that nod verbally towards my values with my loyalty. Because the political left, they also are saying to me that Karp and Thiel are like white nationalist fascists that want to have the global American empire. So it's a very stupid, like, media brain type of thing.
Oh, it's
because
the
you're
Trump
not...
thing all over again, where they fall in love with the left's idea of these things rather than the reality of them.
Exactly. And so therefore it creates a very like knee-jerk style. What I mean by reactionary, I mean like the root word, not the actual politics, but I mean what like reacting to. Yeah. It creates a knee-jerk reactionary dialectic where you're going to say, like, you're going to basically wade into what your political enemies on the left are saying about Karp and Thiel and Palantir, because they are in turn giving you a little bit of catnip in the beginning. And you're going to go to the Germany thing. I think the Germany thing...
Yeah, don't worry. But we're
going to get to it.
Let's just
but the national service thing should tell you right away what they want.
Oh, yeah. They need
so,
bodies. And,
yeah. Because it's Starship Troopers, where you have to be invested in the civilization.
It's all based, and because democracy is so based, right? Even if we limit the franchise, it's so based. But continuing, if a U.S. Marine asks for better
what did George Bush, before you go on, what did George Bush say about
fool me once, shame on you.
Fool
me twice, can't get fooled again.
Or to save the Constitution, we have to suspend, or something like that. To save democracy, we have to suspend democracy, or something like that. Yeah. Not that I agree. Like I think
sounds like democracy only functions once in a while. Like it
sounds like democracy only functions with an exception.
Yeah.
you know.
If a U.S. Marine asks for a better rifle, we should build it, and the same goes for software. We should not, as a country, continue.
Like they haven't devoted their every waking moment to this. Marine walks in, I could use a better software.
I could use a better ACOG scope.
The country should be capable of continuing a debate about the appropriateness of military action abroad, while also remaining unflinching in our commitment to those who we've asked to step in harm's way, which is why we're a country without hypersonic missiles, by the way.
But your commitment to them is to make
missiles.
But
you
your
have to
commitment
support
to
the troops. It's kind of like the trans people, the trans argument.
Yeah.
Like if you don't let me get this operation, I'm gonna kill myself.
Or other people, or school children.
Or school children. I'm in a war now. You have to support me. The war is stupid. We should have done. I'm in a war now. Now you have to support me.
There was people literally saying this.
It's literally the trans argument.
But GSP, some of them are detransitioning. You can't hate on them for that.
Yeah, it's true.
But don't worry. Public servants need not be our priests. Any business that compensates its employees in the way the federal government compensates public servants would struggle to thrive. Oh, what very brave confrontation of bureaucracy that you're not going to deepen under your own regime. That's never
socialism for corporations, feudalism for you. I know it's a leftist talking point.
Feudalism
but the leftists can say something true.
Okay, let's just be straight about that.
But you're supporting the American troop. But you're supporting them to the extent that they could fight better in a future war against another civilizational power that a lot of them are going to die in.
Or worse yet, support them putting down you and your neighborhood and your town. Once again, it's I don't want to put on my tinfoil hat here, but this also lends itself to a martial law state if the situation warrants it, or if they say the situation warrants it. That this army that you're building to fight off the Chi-Coms is more likely to be marching through your streets.
But the thing is, Constantine, is that we're enough of I'm enough of someone who thinks outside of the box in terms of democracy and the Constitution being a piece of paper and all that stuff. But the thing is, if you actually did have a civilization that you were invested in, that did invest in the future of your children and grandchildren, then maybe that argument would kind of be a bit more salient in terms of, okay, we have to do radical things in order to preserve what we have and what our ancestors built.
I agree. And
but the current day Western world and the current elites that run said Western world are not of that character and are not worthy of your loyalty and respect. I hate to say it, but that's just the reality.
No, it's not. And I know I keep defaulting to this example, but as it stands now, we are subjects of the global Ottoman Empire. You are attack.
You're gonna have goon. You know what you're gonna have? You're gonna have like that White House counterterrorism OnlyFans sugar baby. You're gonna have Gooner Cadilloism. That's the grand future, Gooner Cadilloism.
Yeah,
if things go the way they're going. So
wait, we're getting to my favorite point here. We should show far more grace to those who have subjected themselves to public life. The eradication of any forgiveness, a jettisoning of any tolerance to the complexities and contradictions of the human psyche, may leave us with a cast of characters at the helm we will grow to regret. You see, we need to give all the grace and forgiveness to the public figures, but the everyday people, they need even more scrutinized.
So what if they went to an island? So what?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your racist post from 2013, or your I'm sorry, it's anti-Semitic is the high crime now, because racism is quote unquote base so long as you do it the right way.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, but don't buy into their.
You think I wanted to eat those babies?
Don't take their bait is all I'm saying, okay? Because they'll give you things you want, but the price tag is something you cannot afford.
There was a lot of this discourse around when the files came out, like if we just forgive public figures and move on, that would be...
It's just totally insane. They didn't even put anybody in jail. Like, at least the British just put in the two Zios, McSweeney and Mandelson, who wanted them to join the war in Iran. At least Starmer was smart enough to get rid of those two. I'm not going to say the F word.
Even though Starmer, he let off Jimmy Savile when he was a persecutor, but that's neither here nor there.
There was no, I mean, there was no, he wasn't morally guided. He was being absolutely pragmatic.
It was the trash taking out the trash.
Yeah, the trash taking out the trash. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, the psychologization of modern politics is leading us astray. Those who look at the political arena to nourish their soul and a sense of self, who rely too heavily on their internal life, finding expression in people they may never meet, will be left disappointed.
You know what's so crazy about this? You know what's so crazy about this?
People are getting too invested in this.
Yeah.
Not good.
Is that it's kind of like they give you a bit of a... Okay, so here's the thing, okay? They give you a bit of a truth.
Yes.
but then they distort that truth in the same moment.
Absolutely.
The truth is that people are too politically invested in the sense that politics has become the cultural expression for most younger people on the internet. Politics is better than entertainment. Entertainment was never quote unquote apolitical. Art was never quote unquote apolitical. The leftoids are kind of correct about that, but in a wrong way. But the point being is that in terms of the hypernormalization structure of politics and political debates and culture war being blasted at you 24/7 to where it becomes like slop entertainment, they're correct about that. But then what they're doing is they're saying that basically as elites that have Richard Hanani, what's that other fucking guy? I hate his guts.
They all blend
Nathan
together.
Kaufness.
Oh.
Nathan Kaufness. These people, they're like, okay, the average normie can't handle this. Their minds are being fucked out of their brains, right? I know I'm being vulgar, but it's 11 at night. So anyways, the average normie, their brains are being exploded by the hyper-reification of political debates in the culture war, which is correct, on the internet especially. But therefore, we need elite human capital to come in and do a heckin' neo-cameralist formalism where they take away the burden of political obligation to most people. No, I agree. Political obligation to most normies hasn't really proven to be great. Obviously, the history of democracy is sort of filled with states of exception. So the reactionary argument is correct in that sense. The average person probably is better off not being given the burden of responsibility of the political future of a whole civilization. That's correct. But the problem is, we do not live, again, in an ancient regime. We do not live in a civilization world picture that facilitates people having an obligation at a root spiritual instinctual level towards their own people, their own civilization. So therefore, what the sort of the Curtis Yarvin version of NRX, there's other versions, but let's say the more popular one, is that okay, so we have to unleaven the burden. We have to unlever the burden of politics to most people. And we have to give it in the hands of elite human capital. And this will be a sort of secular, messianic, enlightening
Wait,
They want
wait,
the impossible.
population.
They want the
Yeah.
impossible.
And it's
If
impossible.
they want
Yeah.
this territory that is called the United States, right? I mean, he's making an argument here that soft power no longer works. But now he's making an argument, and he will elaborate when we get to point 13. The very the very moral argument that has given America so much leverage,
oh,
right? Like he's contradicting some of his earlier points in this way.
He was taking a
He
lot
wants
of
the
research
impossible, like-
chemicals writing this.
like honestly, Americans who want this vision have to accept America dies and something else because but then when we get to point 13, we'll see why this is
okay. In that
impossible.
case, I will quickly go through 11 and 12 and get to 13 because I think you're hitting on something here. So number 11, our society has grown too eager to hasten and often gleeful at the demise of its enemies. The vanquishing of an opponent is a moment to pause, not to rejoice. Once again, I feel like we've gone over this. What you guys had said previously just really fits the mold on that.
No, he agrees with that, but the problem is you're fostering a lot of people in the political discourse that actually think the opposite of
Yeah,
that. I mean, the
it's-
whole
Yeah, absolutely.
the culture war is based off of that. The whole like hatred of the Iranians, hatred of other people, hatred of like, you know, give your political enemy. Now it's like I guess the SPLC is like any other person to the right of me criticizing me as an SPLC plant. Like it's no, again, like I will give Peter Thiel and Alex Karp this. They are very smart people. They have read a lot of philosophy. They know what they're talking about in a certain sense.
Yeah.
But they're misguided by other things, I think, deep within, on a spiritual level. So what they're saying here is correct, that there should be a mass awakening away from the current political structure. But like you were saying, what that would cost, what that would look like, here's the thing. I said this on DA. Everybody's trying, or maybe I said this in private. I think I said this to my girlfriend recently. Everybody's trying to vie for this post-liberal future because liberalism kind of doesn't look like it has very much of a future, which in some ways is good. But at the same time, what would that picture of like post-liberal future? I was gonna say the Sargon of Akkad liberalistism, but like, okay, what would a post-liberal future actually look like in practice? That is yet to be. That is what is currently being debated over, and I think that when he's saying this, is objectively a correct point. So I will give Thiel and Karp that, but you have to analyze why are they saying it.
Which gets back to the point where they have loaded this up with
Yes.
catnip, and on the
Yes.
surface, a lot of people who know better otherwise might think, well, that's not too bad. Until, okay, the atomic age is ending, our age of turns, the atomic
Post
age...
15's the ultimate catnip to certain posters I could name. Put it that way.
Okay, yeah, we'll definitely get to that.
I'm not going to name, but you know what I mean. It's a certain flavor of posting. I think they put that in there specifically for.
I know exactly what you mean. I'll breeze past point 12, but we'll get to point 13 because I think that's
point 13 is the most important. Yeah,
So point 12, our one age of turns is ending. The atomic age, the other one's beginning. Built on AI is set to begin. Once again, this idea that AI is anything more than just a chatbot, which is my firm opinion.
It's a genetic Hiroshima, to quote Virilio. Yeah.
Okay, so point 13, the one I think we've all been vying to get to. No other country in the history of the world has advanced progressive values more than this one. The United States is far from perfect, but it's easy to forget how much opportunity exists in this country for those who are not hereditary elites than any other nation on this planet. Wow.
You hear that, poor ambitious people from I don't know, Kuala Lumpur
Mumbai.
or Mumbai. You hear that?
Kerala.
They're not going to fight for you, dude.
No, but see, I think maybe they got that in there just because they even though it's like kind of like an impossible thing, because the leftoids are going to call them evil Nazi, white nationalist, fascists, anyways.
He wants opportunism.
Yeah.
And this is so good. This is excellent that we read Emanuel Todd and this. He thinks he can squeeze out of opportunism and being grateful for expressing and succeeding in your opportunism, right? Just like in the movies. Maybe Al Pacino can do a role. He thinks he can squeeze out of this opportunistic civilization what other civilizations that aren't like that can do. That's what's driving this.
Squaring the
But
circle.
but
Yeah.
but it's this whole project is squaring the circle because how they can't let go of the soft power because this point 13 is about the soft power that's not working anymore, but he thinks he can squeeze out of the matrix of this soft power, of this democratic moralizing, and he can make American super soldiers out of it. You know what, dude? Nobody like look at the track record. Nobody gives a shit about like I can get rich in America and I don't have to because just because I'm not from a rich family I can get rich there, as if
Yeah.
like he's trying to he's trying to encourage like basically the most self-centered, selfish people not willing to sacrifice unless it's for their own ends. And now he wants to say, oh, just like Silicon Valley, you got to give back. We're giving back, you got to give back too, right?
But now the most selfish and opportunistic people around the world can come to America and do that as well.
Yeah. Then we just need more selfish super soldiers, and
you know what this is? This is unironically
the
book.
So idiotic. It is so idiotic. They're trying to create like a group consciousness from a civilization that favors individual selfishness.
That basically obviates group consciousness in its very structure.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is literally the book I read when we were in my IR. I had this IR grad course, and we read this book, Liberal Leviathan. This is essentially that, like globalism but based, like globalism but masculine. Like the whole structure of the basically what has been predicated, and I don't say this is like Western values, quote unquote, proper, like in terms of the ancient values of the West. What I mean is the sort of Western values post World War II, the like Nuremberg regime, or the like post Soviet collapse of the Soviet Union regime, has been predicated essentially, like you were saying, GSP, on essentially bracketing that collective communal impulse or any form of politics that gears towards that to this like individual hyper modern notion of the self.
Mm-hmm.
But now what Peter Thiel's going at is like, well, the Chinese, they're not burdened by this. The Russians are not burdened by this. The Iranians, the Indians, all of them, the BRIC nations, they have a totally different world picture. But how can we extract the same martial element out
with
of
totally different material,
rootless individuals? Yeah. How can we do this? We obviously need like
different
technocracy,
people, but they want to achieve the same results.
Yeah.
Like that is what's so funny about this,
Yeah.
and of course the language is still vague enough that there are people who have an imagination that has a very specific kind of America that could do this, that could square
a
the
Norman
circle.
Rockwell painting America,
right? Or people who are even more realistic than that. Again, on the dissident right, who will fill in these gaps in the points and will flesh out that vision. These 22 points are vague enough to do that, and I think it's intentional that they are, right? Because
it'll launch a million Substack articles. It will.
Yeah. But do go on.
So picking up from that point there, point number 14, America power has made a possible. Let me start again on that. American power has made possible an extraordinary long peace.
For
Too
who?
many-
For who, though?
Exactly. Too many people have forgotten or perhaps taken for granted. Nearly a century of some version of peace has prevailed in the world without a great power military conflict. At least 3 generations, billions of people and their children and grandchildren will have never known a world war. I mean, but in what
Yeah,
sense?
but you
Like,
killed millions.
Yet though, we have to create the conditions for a world war now with Palantir.
I mean, but
The
even
fuck?
following through on the post World War II conflicts, we had the Korean War, millions dead. Vietnam War, millions dead and displaced. The Iran-Iraq War, the longest war since World War II.
Damn near a million dead.
Yeah, several small, regionalized, localized conflicts, civil wars.
That were
throughout it.
genocides and ethnic cleansings and all sorts of horrors and so on and so forth. Oh, World War in the Congo.
Oh yeah, it's
wars for post-liberation that may not have been sponsored by various intelligence agencies. But yeah, go ahead.
The entire apparatus of Cold War proxy wars across the world, throughout Africa, throughout Latin America, throughout parts of East Asia. Great power conflict has been outsourced as a result of nuclear weapons. Now, I'm grateful that I guess you could say broader people in Europe and the United States have not had to experience that. And look, I still do acknowledge it has happened elsewhere, but I can't appreciate the form of peace that has reigned on the continent since 1945, up until Yugoslavia, which once again came as the result of the collapse of the Soviet Union and the fall of the Eastern Bloc. Think what you will about the communists. There was a certain thing to be said about the order they maintained, or at least the balance of power, regardless of the regime's ideology. And then, fast forwarding to the Ukraine War, the bloodiest war and largest war since World War II, and that peace has become undone on the back of the same quote-unquote American power. Well, I shouldn't say quote-unquote because the American power is real. But on the back of the same quote-unquote peace that the American power has promised. NATO expansion, the Maidan, every event leading up to that, where this golden age of peace that they say, which is very conditional considering the other conflicts we had listed, has been itself weaponized to create a cataclysmic conflict in many ways.
Well, in Iraq and Afghanistan as well, but that's like a side issue.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't want to downplay the significance of those small imperial wars, but you take those for what they are. But in terms of something, say, cataclysmic, Russia-Ukraine is what I'm looking at.
Yeah. No, but are they But again, this is like they're trying to imply the like Contard like peace through strength doctrine, but they're also saying like we need a national draft and we need to build super weapons and there will be a future war
and getting a meat grinder, etc., etc. Oh, that brings us to our next point. Gladio nationalism, right here, point 15. The post-war neutering of Germany and Japan must be undone. The defanging of Germany was an overcorrection for which Europe is now paying a heavy price. A similar and highly theatrical commitment to Japanese pacifism will, if maintained, also threaten the shift the balance of power in Asia. Okay, so looking at the German point, is the point because Russia is now in Ukraine, despite the fact that the American State Department, culminating in Biden's sabotage of Nord Stream, has done everything it can to undermine German-Russian relations? Is the point they're trying to make here that Germany needs to be the bulwark against Russia, despite the fact that, really, in spite of themselves, under the leadership of somebody like Merkel, they managed to achieve Bismarck's dream of I shouldn't go that far, but they managed to take one step closer to Bismarck's dream of, say, a codependent relationship with Russia that maintains continental peace.
Yeah.
No, but see, you know what I mean?
He's trying. They don't even acknowledge responsibility. This was a war that America spent decades to come to. The war that would finally break Russia, right? First, with the British and the Jewish bankers and the Germans, prior to World War I and during World War I, they fantasize Russia will go through a civil war after a communist revolution. They'll destroy themselves. Then we move in, right? And it didn't happen, right? It was horrible for the Russian people. It was horrible for Christians. Yes, we know. But remember, all of these people did not do this because they were all like thousands of little Trumps, in the teens and early in the late Victorian period. All of them dreamt of doing this.
Well, they prevented the whites from. I shouldn't say
Yeah,
prevent them from winning,
Yeah.
Churchill in
but they
his
did.
memoirs
They
literally
hamstrung the
said,
whites.
yes, yes, because
Yeah, but then they sided with them.
they
Then they
wanted the
sided with
communists to
Stalin.
win, and when the communists didn't give them what they wanted, then the communists became the enemy.
Yes, but at the same time, their interest was in keeping the Russian Civil War ongoing rather than
Yes.
letting any one
Yeah.
side win. Because
Yes,
they
yes.
let Trotsky back in. They let the revolution happen. When they didn't give them what they wanted, they tacitly sided with the whites, which most Western intervention was, we'll shoot you if you try to go into any territories to retake them. And I mean, there's documented evidence of that. And it's like I said, the idea that they were on some anti-Bolshevik
and we'll loot your
crusade.
farmland while we're
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then once again,
And then World War II, and then look what happens with that.
you have many of these great figures of the White Army who are left there looking like clowns because they, I guess, understandably thought that, hey, these Western powers that we were ostensibly allied with in World War I are here to help us, and then they end up exiled and in shame because they were there to make sure that they didn't win the war and that the war just perpetually continued.
That's right. It was literally an extermination. What they wanted was an extermination of Russians in order to get the resources for the new modern world. That is what they wanted. That is what the Europeans wanted, and that is also what Jewish bankers wanted. They both wanted the same thing.
But
As much as people don't want to hear that.
Touching on the Germany point on this again before I move on to the Japan point, because I have another take about that's similar, but I think does require distinction. It's just Mackinder all over again. The continental powers have to be fighting.
Right.
Yes.
No,
Because
but
if they're
also, like,
fighting, the safest place to invest early on was Britain. Now America is something like Britain could only dream of, because if America causes chaos all over the world, guess which place you can park your money. But of course, America's in this deindustrialization, and what you're seeing is capital flight going to China. Even though America is like literally further away from where all of this is happening, people don't trust whatever is happening in the US more than in China. Paradoxically, I might add.
And Japan, the Japan one I think is more insidious because
Yeah.
they're not asking for. I mean, look, we talk about Russia and Germany. That's old style Mackinder. The continental powers have to fight. Disgusting, but we know what it is. Japan, they're in effect asking to become the next Ukraine.
Yes.
But against China for Taiwan. Yeah.
We fought against you in World War II. We're sorry. Can you guys fight China and Russia for us? Like,
or you can call it Formosa again if you want.
No, but here's the thing though. This point, now that I'm thinking about it, it's a way for Peter Thiel to, I think, try to pull a like 7D intellectual political science chess move, in the sense of what I mentioned of the false dialectic, right? Now, a lot of people, like a lot of like the absolute scum dregs on Reddit and Blue Sky, they took this point to mean that, well, actually, Palantir, they're like evil Nazis that want to like upend like post-war guilt of the Germans, the way that like, anime Nazis post about, the way that like, Peter Thiel's like got the Thomas 777 revisionism going on. Like, so with the political right, like the posters, they'll play into that because obviously it's like, well, he's stating a fact about Germany and Japan and the sort of like post-war order that grounded them down and basically ushered in like total post-nationalism, globalism into their collective psyche for the, as a sort of like anti-fascism becomes the ersatz secular religion of the West, right? But what he's saying if you look at the other points in the
Yeah, yeah.
manifesto, he's not doing this as this like based fasci revisionism.
This is
He's
what I mean
saying,
about the points are so general that
yeah,
everybody can pour
gleam
into it
something off of it.
all kind of
Gladio
meaning.
nationalism.
Yeah, so he knows that anyone can gleam. So the leftoids are going to be like, see, Palantir, they're like fascist revisionists. They're like, who's the big revisionist with the book series? What's his name? I can't. I'm having a brain fart.
There's a lot of them. But I know.
The pop.
Uh,
the denialist. You know what I mean?
That I don't remember his name, but I know. Exactly.
No, but I'm not trying to make a facetious point. I'm actually having a brain fart.
I know what you're trying to say, but
yeah.
The name
No, but the point being is that they're interpreting like revisionism and denialism and like, oh, that means that Peter Thiel wants to upend the whole like post-war order that is predicated on this religious obligation to grounding down the German spirit in the name of anti-fascism. Never again, blah, 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 right? But what he's saying, actually, I think, is given the light of the other points, especially the progressive one, is that we need to overcome that because the Germans and the Japanese are going to need Gladio Disneyland nationalist pride to fight a greater war to secure a greater victory for global liberalism and that particular post-war ethos. So he's not doing this so like based right-wing posters can have a sense of national pride to like smash the anti-fascist religion Nuremberg regime, like the Bundesrepublik, whatever. It's like, Peter Thiel's not like aiming for this like posters World War II revisionism. What he's saying is that,
well, you can have that so long as you bleed out in the fields of Konstantinivka.
Exactly. So long as you have a little bit of national pride to motivate you to fight a greater conflict or to have a sense of a greater agency over that very same internationalist post-national liberal project that comes out of World War II. It's like, and like you were saying, GSP, people can read anything into these because they're intentionally vague.
They're intentionally vague. And the thing is what I find interesting is that the liberals are looking at this as a kind of a blueprint. Of course, they're infusing these words with their entire tautology, their entire liberal epistemology.
Yes.
To try to make sense of it, right?
He must actually be a fascist.
It could never, like, they don't even observe their own actions, their own opinions, their own posts on social media. For instance, they're all delighted when Russia is hurt one way or another, right?
Right.
But then
even if they have to side with Tajiks or whatever.
Right. But then they want like, Karp is here telling them like, we're preparing for a bigger war, but they interpret that as a civil war.
Yeah.
They think
they're going to own the libs for real.
Right. They think that this is in preparation not to fight Russia and China and Iran, but for an internal conflict. In being mistaken, they might actually be onto something. Right? Because I think subconsciously what they're thinking is it's not going to work. They can't say democracy and liberal values are just not worth fighting and killing for, or not anymore, or they were when it was a homogenous society, but not anymore.
Right.
Right?
Libtards can never say that
They cannot
ever
come to terms with that. They can never say those things. But they can weave a special narrative about how really this is in preparation for a civil war or for martial law, but not martial law for anything in and of martial law only for in and of itself. And they're probably wondering why. But they don't. I haven't seen a lot of their posts, but do they answer why? Right?
Well, no, they think that like Trump, Musk, and Thiel, that they're all part of this international fascist coalition, and the Russians are also involved, and that's what they're the usual.
Right.
Yeah, Dugin is in charge.
Yeah, Dugin's the intellectual architect of the. He's calling Palantir global Satan, but in the Antichrist, but it's
all part of the Shabbat game.
This is what I mean. Every one of these groups has a bloated idea of just how powerful and smart and persuasive they are.
Yeah.
Right? Of
And they have the
course,
piss poor
of course,
psychology of mind of the
right,
enemy.
of course, Thiel and Dugan
Musk.
Musk cannot walk on stage holding their arms in the air like they're hockey champions, right? They can't come out and say now the degenerates will pay.
We're gonna finally ban
But they
HRT.
literally think even though all the evidence countervails every one of their stupid assumptions
Yeah.
in their heads, they are so powerful. They have to be monitored so much, right? That every action, like Trump has allowed for transitional therapy for trans people, right? For trans kids. By the way, we have to make them better rifles.
Oh God! Holy shit!
For at home and Iran. Anyways, as long as an adult, they're not even necessarily their biological parent, but their what would not their custodian, but what their legal parent, right? Can give them the okay to do this, right? Even something like this, if you bring it up, if you talk with the liberal, they'll say, "Well, he's just doing that to appease us." Again, really stupid people who think all the like they're not doing 5D chess because they're afraid of you. They're not afraid of you.
Yeah.
They're not afraid of you. Like, you don't own the media. You're not going to change anything. You know that. And that's why the suggestion of reintroducing the draft, the suggestion of monitoring social media is that's why you think it's all in preparation to stop a civil war from happening here and not to get populations in Japan and Romania and Germany to go fight against these brick-aligned nations, right? Like, that's how stupid they are. Even when the evidence is there in front of them, there has to be a fantastical explanation. Anyways,
It's all
And the
I'm
political
repeating
right
myself.
has another analogous notion of that as well, where like actually they are based and we need to support them and they're going to own the libs. Oh, but also there's one brick. But here's the thing, GSP and Constantine, there's one brick nation that Silicon Valley really likes.
Brazil,
Really will
South
fight
Africa?
for. Yeah, South Africa. Well,
really?
no. India,
South Africa?
India,
Oh, yeah,
India.
that's right.
Yeah,
They love
but see, India, they also are invested in our project, so they're not like really a brick nation.
Are you telling me that India is indeed lying too, Sar?
Yeah. No, but see, that's the inherent contradiction of it, because India good, China bad. Like it's
Yeah, obviously they want to stoke um, a rivalry, and some of those violent episodes that we saw in the Himalayas between the Chinese and the Indians. They need that, right? So obviously they're trying to appeal to them. Come
I'm
join
not
us in our
prepared for the pro-Indian
Judeo-Aryan.
the actual Aryans.
I am not
Yeah.
prepared for the quote-unquote based India posting when they start having border feuds with China again. I don't think I can tolerate that.
No, it's just too much.
Look, say what you will about China. I'm sure there's criticism to be had, but 100%.
I'm not like, again, like I've spent countless hours of my life studying Hinduism. I'm not like totally, you know what I mean? Like I'm not like trying to be like some, I'm not trying to be vulgar in my racism.
No,
but
yeah.
But the point being, in terms of like as a civilization, these same people have obviously an investment in hedging bets against the domestic labor markets in North America and Europe. And so the whole H-1B debate is like, again, another thing that people seem to forget, that like the H-1B Spurg posting that happened last year in the beginning of this year. Like it's like, you're not going to find a lot of, how shall I say this? I think people like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, because I think even Peter Thiel has some like South African connection somewhere. I think they
Mm.
do on a base level understand what demographic collapse looks like.
Yeah,
But
they
that
do,
being
but they
said,
can't say it.
they can't say it. But at the same time, I wouldn't want to place my bet on that means secretly they actually are based and they actually
Yeah,
are like
yeah, yeah.
defenders of Western
Yeah, but
civilization.
they understand it for the wrong reasons. That's
Exactly. They understand it from a managerial position of as over a civilizational
Yeah,
block.
libs don't understand that they want conservatives and liberals to stop the culture war and
Yeah.
unite behind this project.
Yes, and it's not that Musk and Thiel want to like usher in like apartheid level racism, despite what certain, like posters that are doing the job of like laundering based consent to this that say that actually, yeah, like, Elon Musk's our guy and he like knows about the history of South Africa and Ian Smith. And it's like, no, you don't understand. Like, there's no like secret code whistle, dog whistle basedness going on. It's that they're
it's
viewing it as a
catnip,
manager.
like the rest of these
Yeah.
points.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
yeah.
and that being said, number 16. We should
Okay, let's go.
applaud those who attempt to build where the market has failed to act. The culture almost snickers at Musk's interest in grand narrative, as if billionaires ought to simply stay in the lane of enriching themselves. Any curiosity or genuine interest in the value of what he's created is essentially dismissed, or perhaps lurks from beneath a thinly veiled scorn. Wow.
Again, a little bit of truth. The truth is, yes, this is the kernel of futurism that I think is probably necessary. But
America's
again,
been ruled by billionaires for a very long time. They're trying to make it look
but we
like
have been. Yeah,
they're trying to make
yeah.
it. They're trying to make this look like that
We
hasn't
haven't
been
been
the
ruled
case.
by them.
No, it's been like this because like for good or for bad, and some of these billionaires abused and they see the reason Musk exists. I mean, not the reason, but the reason he exists in the media, in the way he exists in the media, is to project that the mythology of the American billionaire,
Yes.
or
Yeah.
previously the millionaire. That he's not. But there are other billionaires who are who might have less money than him, who actually determine what U.S. geopolitical strategy will be, and you're never going to hear about those guys. He's there as a poster boy. He's there to conceal them and maybe make things a little bit more palatable.
To actually have a vision, or project a form of vision.
He's there to capture their imagination.
Yeah. But he's still part of the. But that's the thing, though. He's still part of the dialectical system because if you look at things systematically, if you look at things from like a grand total picture, there is a reason why a lot of the billionaire class has trended towards total civilizational stagnation, because there's an incentive there, and because of the governing structures of the Western world for the past 50 to 100 years have pulled towards that direction of entropy. And I understand that, again, like I say, kernel of truth. There is something to be said about someone with money and vision coming in to actually give, like, to steer the course towards something that is generally exciting and futuristic. That's a noble goal. I wouldn't want to denigrate that. But at the same time, I have my severe doubts about Elon Musk being that guy.
Oh, yeah. I don't think there's any question about that.
Yeah,
but
so
I see what you guys are getting at.
But the point being is that there's a reason why the billionaire class has trended towards a form of cultural and civilizational entropy. There's a number of reasons why, and why they're so incentivized to do so. And I think that obviously there should be an applause towards any project that disrupts that. But you're entrusting those same people with that level of power to steer the course. Why? Well, which is a tautology, because you could say, okay, why haven't they done this? Why haven't they led us to like a Star Trek futurism so far? Or is it impossible? Did they not want to do it at a previous date, but they had a come to Jesus moment about the future of the Western civilization and the American Empire?
Because the culture is already comical. For them to achieve Star Trooper level commitment, I mean, you either need like really stupid people, or like
We're
Like
geniuses.
the culture will look even more ridiculous. It will have to look even more farcical. Trump, without a doubt, is the most farcical president ever. Not just in America, any country. There are African presidents less farcical than him.
General Butt Naked.
Yeah, the
Right?
one guy who declared himself the Central African Emperor, he had the right idea. I cannot remember his name for the life of me, but you know the one I'm talking about.
There's been a few of them. Oh my god.
Yeah, did they blockade the Strait of Hormuz?
Only because they chose not to.
That's right.
Yeah, Idi Amin, he wanted to send aid to the British. He just, they rejected him at the time in the Falkland War.
Speaking of Silicon Valley society, I know that we had picked up on that before. Silicon Valley must play a role in addressing violent crime. Many politicians across the United States have essentially shrugged when it comes to violent crime, abandoning any serious effort to address the problem or take any risk with their constituencies or donors in coming up with solutions and experiments in what should be a desperate bid to save lives. So they're taking the core responsibility of the state, which is the suppression of criminality, and outsourcing it to Peter Thiel and Alex Karp, based
Sounds
AI
kind of
system.
racist. No, I don't believe it is. Again, but a liberal will look at this and go,
That means they want racism.
They're going to go after blacks.
Yeah.
And then first they came for the blacks, then they came for the...
Yeah, the last point the libtards
came for the taco stands.
Yeah. they came for the abuelas frying meats on the overturned grocery carts in the middle of New York. On the grate. Oh fuck.
Yeah, but again, anyways, go on.
Number 22 is the one that libtards have really blown their stack.
Oh, I love it. Let's get to
we'll get to it. The ruthless exposure of the private lives of public figures drives too far, too much of the talent away from government service. The public arena, the shallow and petty assaults against those who dare to become something other than enrich themselves, aka go to the island, has become so unforgiving that the Republic is left with a significant roster of ineffectual empty vessels whose ambitions would one would forgive if they were any genuine.
Just let them live out their Dionysian fantasies as overmen on the island. Just let them do it.
But you, the private citizen, deserves all the scrutiny.
Yeah.
Which is what these points all come down to. 19. The caution in public life is that we unwittingly encourage is corrosive. Those who say nothing often say nothing much at all. Those who say nothing wrong often say nothing much at all.
Oh, this is ridiculous. But this and 18 are so ridiculous. He's almost suggesting, if you want a blow up doll guy instead of a guy who does things to kids, you could be risking talent.
You could.
What is he saying?
You could be fucking alt-lit art-ho writers at the latest Miami beachfront party, and you could be having your lavish hipster racism art-ho experience, but it's people would criticize you for maybe occasionally dropping an M-bomb while you support, NGOs that give trans surgeries to Africans. You need the space to drop the N-bomb, to drop the gamer word while you're going to war with China. But also going to war with China would also necessitate a level of baseness beyond comprehension, but you would be criticized for doing so. So what's that about the global economy? Who cares? The global economy is not real. No, again, it all comes I think Alex Karp was on some very massive research peptides while he was writing this. So I don't know, man.
Oh no, it's gold in all the wrong ways. The pervasive intolerance of religious
Can't
beliefs.
you just let me fuck my racist hipster alt-lit art ho? Can't you just let me do it? Can't you just let me drop a gamer word or two and not have it be a big deal?
What kind
while
of
I
talent
short
you're
the global
up?
Economy. What'd you see, GSP?
What kind of talent you're passing up?
Yes, think of the elite human capital.
Yeah. Just let Richard and Anya be Richard Hosty
This is
one
way
more
past
time.
anime girlfriends. Do you understand?
Ah! Just let Richard Hanania be Richard Hosty for one more article.
Ugh.
Delusional.
I hate that I have to think about that man. But continuing, point
Oh.
20: the pervasive intolerance of religious belief in certain circles must be resisted. The elite's intolerance of religious belief is perhaps one of the most telling signs that its political project constitutes a less open intellectual movement than many within it would claim. So
Again, could be read either way, because Silicon
Yes,
Valley has
yes.
always had an obsession over like New Ageism, right? Now, I've often said this point, but then what do they actually mean by it in practice? Is a different.
So just out of
Yeah.
curiosity, and GSP, I know I can speak directly to you here, and Geo, probably you'll pick up on what we're saying, but I'm not quite sure how different it is. So if I talk about the eschatology of my beliefs and the role of I don't know, a certain ethno-religious group of people in that in quite an adversarial role, am I going to be able to say that is that part of the tolerance we have to have for religious beliefs? Or am I going to end up in the panopticon? Which is it? Which is it, Peter?
You'll end up in the panopticon, and you'll be watching videos about New Age Jesus and how he really hates Palestinians.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Iranians.
Yeah, Anarians.
And the Chinese are idol
They're so
worshippers.
intolerant.
Yeah. No, I think like I think okay. To be fair though, I know we're clowning on Karp and Thiel, but to be fair, I think that does culminate in a lot of like Silicon Valley New Age obsessions where they're saying like maybe it shouldn't be a big deal if like someone who has a lot of money and power or a scientist or like a computer guy does have like an eccentric metaphysical belief structure, which I think is fine, obviously, but then again,
But
I mean,
they sound so
yeah.
fragile.
yeah.
They're saying like we could be great if you could just let us express ourselves and
If you just let us have
accept
some
our anime
ayahuasca.
girlfriends and
Yeah.
New Age anti-Hamas Jesus and like.
New Age anti.
But
That's.
all kidding
Yeah.
aside, I think of all of them, number 20 is one of the ones that stands out that can be read by either left or right.
Yeah.
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 It's the perfect catnip. But
It's super, yeah.
let's power through. We're almost to the end here. 21. Some cultures may have produced vital advances. Others remain dysfunctional and regressive. All cultures are now equal. Criticism and value judgment are forbidden. Yet this new dogma glosses over the fact that certain cultures, and indeed subcultures, have produced wonders. Others have provided middling and even worse, regressive and harmful. Once again,
brown-coded third worldism.
Yeah, I wonder what they define as that. I mean, are we going to talk about, I don't know, maybe the great Russian literary music tradition? Is that brown third world coded, while your new age hippie whatever commune whatever it is that high culture then? Because that's the distinction that sounds like they would be using it for.
Mm-hmm,
no, but see, the last 2 points of the libtards have been like they've run with.
Oh yeah,
no,
this is the perfect bait for them. This is the perfect way to get them foaming at the mouth. And I understand what you're getting at, but once again, like they're going to look at the the actual great cultural achievements of European civilization, and they're going to at best give those a passing glance, if not condemn them, or maybe they'll like have a very superficial endorsement of them to get the Gladio nationalists on board, whatever. While whatever gobbledygook that they came up with when they were high on mushrooms is going to be the pinnacle of human achievement, and that's why all cultures aren't equal.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my read on it, at least. You guys tell me if I'm wrong.
And again, this is very defensive. This is very defensive. Now, there's hundreds of thousands of people that if you go on, BBC, YouTube, BBC, and if the Russo-Ukrainian war is brought up, or Iran, or Israel, Lebanon, whatever, you're going to have people who are going to tell you, like, if you're an idiot if you think the West is inferior. They're not all the same. We're better, right? Like, I think that's what this point is probably trying to appeal to, because those people are already very, very well invested. Now, the lib will only be invested in so much as it concerns because again, it's racial. Only so much as it concerns Russia because they're white, then bad. But Iran, maybe we should take it easy, right?
Oh, we'll go to war with Iran because they hate,
Yeah,
trans
locking up Pussy
POCs.
Riot is bad.
Yeah.
But I'm not making a plea for for Pahlavi or whatever, but they do tend to be pretty quiet when it comes to. Again, it's all selective. It's the liberal Article 5, but every group has a fictional Article 5.
Yeah.
It's always selective. It's always situational.
Yeah. Yeah. No, but I think from their point of view, it's sort of like what Elon Musk said when he started endorsing Trump, where he's like, we need to put the woke away because that's it's hobbling innovation. And I think like there could be a lot of nefarious readings into this, both from like a left wing and right wing perspective. But I think it's more so like on the surface, at least, it's just denoting like, yeah, civilizations and cultures and peoples are different, and we have to acknowledge that fact and get over it. And that's like a stymie to innovation if we have to like, which is a good point, obviously. Like it is a stymie to innovate. It's stymieing innovation to pretend otherwise.
Well, no, it's objectively true. It's just the messenger taints the
messenger is kind of sus. Yeah.
Okay, the vaunted Point 22 that has just had the liberals foaming at the mouth. We must resist the shallow temptation of a vacant and hollow pluralism. We in America, and more broadly in the West, have for the half-past century resisted defining national cultures in the name of inclusivity, but inclusion into what?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Anorex talking points from 15 years ago.
Yeah, see, this is what I mean. Like,
never seen anything like it.
Well, I mean, if they
read
in
the 80s,
if they read some of the Troon manifestos that are much more specific, like maybe, like it's again, they're very vague. We already discussed why they're so vague, but to me, this is weak. Like, why do you feel like you need to write a manifesto?
Yeah, it's a weird.
Like, maybe just get on with it, right? Like the manifesto thing. Like, what is that? Is it like these are
they want to be like
billionaires?
the revolutionary writer Ethan Tarabal? Is that what's
Yeah,
going
maybe
on?
they're trying to tap into that, like
Yeah.
as if like
we're cool and hip like they were in the 90s in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm sold. This is the Western techno-futurist fascist based Catnip. I was promised. I retract all of my criticism of Donald Trump. I retract all my criticism of Peter Thiel. The Iran war was a great idea. Now can I have my table scraps?
It's like,
because that's all I've ever wanted. Just my precious table scraps. While you build a world unrecognizable to any that I've been promised, any that I may know from any amount of study from history, that has the trappings of everything I might want, yet at the core of it resembles the exact opposite of what I want. And right there, I'm down there, I'm kissing the feet of Elon Musk, of Peter Thiel, even of Donald Trump, begging for them to make this reality, that I will risk life and limb against China on the Korean Peninsula, anywhere along the Dnieper River, and that's how much this means to me. And that we need to remilitarize Germany and keep the continent divided and plunge the last gasp of European civilization into a cataclysmic war that ultimately nobody will win, and that will allow the elites in Washington to become king of the ashes. Because that is that is America, okay? That is what I learned, and that's what I embrace.
No, but people but that's what they think. Like,
no, this is exactly what they. I hate to. Think. I don't know. Might be dipping into strawman territory, but that's my honest read of the situation here. If anyone wants to try to put up a defense of this in the comments, please do. I'm curious to see what the other perspective is here, because I'm trying. I'm just not seeing it.
Why? But here's the thing, though. For people that think that we're like anti-American, Duganite, like third worldist fucking
We're
anti,
second
like,
worldists. I don't know how
yeah,
many times I have to say
we're
this.
second worldists. We're second world. My mother's family comes from Brazil, so technically second world. You know, no, but for those people that think that we're going too far and we're like propagandized by like whatever
By the Qatari network.
the Qatari network, the Islamo-Duganist Qatari network. What I would say is that rather than America rule in the future, rather than America ruling over an ash heap, but it's a global ash heap, America has the ability to do what Trump originally said, which is to retract the empire in favor of the nation, or rather, to retract the empire in favor of the regional bloc. America could be an incredibly prosperous regional bloc. It may still be culturally the world market, but in terms of having these maniacs risk an apocalyptic global war with China and Russia and Iran, what benefit would there be? Wouldn't you rather
We get
have
to make based edits.
exactly? We get to be based like Panther Den style, spinning wheel, Braveheart Hollywood film edits, But the point being is that would it not be rather conducive to longevity to retreat a little bit and to preserve the land for your children and grandchildren, to still be immensely prosperous and wealthy, and to maybe cut deals with other powers, to still have a defensive shield around North America and continental Europe, but then to recognize that politics is quite different in the 21st century than it was in the previous century. Instead of risking everything for a delusional idea of a global empire that will
Well,
translate into an immense amount of immiseration. So it's not that I'm not anti-American per se. I'm not anti-American people. I'm just saying that a lot of the vision of these people are leading down a very dangerous primrose path
mhm.
to trick you and convince you that you could be a ruler over the world. But really, metaphysically, the kingdom is to come. There's not the kingdom that is here. A deeper
Yeah.
spiritual point, right? So, yeah. Anyways, take it away, GSP. What were you going to say?
No, I was just gonna. I was gonna say, F America. No, I'm joking.
I disavow. I disavow.
Yeah, I
Oh, no.
think. I think. I mean, of course, detractors, critics will say that because they don't want to hear this. But I think we have good, honest critique now. I have relatives in America. Obviously, I don't want to see them live in hardship. That might happen. I don't know. Um, might be worse here than before it gets worse there.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I have no allegiance to America. I don't consider America exceptional. I don't consider it special. I never have. And that sometimes makes even Canadians upset. But that is the case. They're not my people, and I don't care if that hurts them. But I'm not here to I'm not here to coddle them, and I'm not here to you know aggrandize them, or the way Americans talk about American lives, like it's some like you need a kind of algebra you've never done before to figure out why actually this is the most valuable life. Like I get it, it's your own people, but um I'm not an American. I never have been,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you can't expect that from me. Um, so I don't know, and I think it's just intellectually, they're for people who do that, they're just they're probably very scared, and also they're just they're copping out when they don't have to. I mean, we're at a real moment right now, and I think it's not that America's. I mean, you could look at it that America's going for this global empire, but really,
I think it's the reverse. I think they're realizing they're losing their empire. And what's in the balance is either what we always wanted, if we don't get it now, we'll never have it, or, as you said, why can't we retract, right? Well, I think getting Germany and Japan to fight for America is part of the retraction, right?
Hmm.
Because them poisoning the relationship between Germany and Europe versus Russia, and then especially the relationship between Russia and Ukraine, that buys America time. America doesn't care, right? And not all our listeners are American. And
True.
A
if
large
that
number are
bothers
not, as a matter of fact.
the vast majority are not, right? Like, so, like, I'm sorry, like, just
No, but like
move
for
on.
during the Iran thing or during the Canadian tariff thing, I've heard like a lot of like Americans on the right, they're very willing to say like, yeah, that's not my people, fuck them. It's like, okay, but don't like lecture, like you're saying, don't lecture anybody else that has that similar attitude of like, well, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I care about my own people, and but they but a lot of them, even like on the left, they'll view it as like an affront.
Well, I will say,
And
contrary to
it's
popular
weird.
belief, I'm neither Canadian nor am I Russian. Been mistaken for both of those more than I would expect online. I know. I think a few people who do this show just because of you guys think I am Canadian by association. Not that
Yeah.
I'm particularly offended, but
Wait a minute, you're not?
I guess not.
Yeah.
I also don't live in Transnistria. That also might be a surprise to some people. But I mean, someday we'll work that out. But coming from the American side, yeah, I don't expect foreigners to have any regard for my people. And as somebody who is quite disillusioned with the mythos of America, as it were, but still has to live the consequences of this being the country I live in and its overall policy eventually trickling its way down to my day-to-day life. Yeah, I don't see the value in burning the rest of the world down while we retreat. I'm in favor of the retreat part. I'm more than okay with that. I quite prefer it. But I also would rather deal with stable power blocks that emerge in our absence. Even if we do have to give up some of the excess, even if we aren't king of the ash heap, so to speak, for the sake of long-term stability of the world, preservation of global cultures, very bleeding heart stuff, I know. And
Yeah.
even our parent culture, and a lot of Americans will take contention with this, even our parent cultures in Europe, I would like to see them survive and maybe even
Yeah.
thrive. Because
Yeah.
I have regard, because that's where my ancestors came from, more so recently than a lot of Americans. But even talking about my side that goes back to like more the founding stock, quote unquote, it's like I still have regard for those lands. I still view these people as distant relatives in a way, and whether they see me in the same way, I really don't care. This is my personal view. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's like I don't want to turn those to ashes just so we can retreat. I would rather have the stable retreat. I know that might be idealistic, it might be fantasy, but once again, I do think you get this idea in America from a lot of Americans, even ones with quite good instincts who don't care if the rest of the world burns, which is an understandable sentiment. But once again, when it doesn't have to burn, when we can gracefully bow out as much as we can, I find that the much preferable alternative than, even if one could make a strategic argument that, oh, it would be ultimately in our interests. I would actually make the exact opposite argument. I think a more stable world would be in our interest, even if
Yeah,
we
like
don't
breeding a
immediately.
massive amount of resentment and animosity in the rest of the world towards you is not exactly in your interests either.
Yes, I would rather
You know?
shake hands with the Germans and the Russians arranging a new European security architecture than leaving them fight each other.
Yeah.
If possible. Not that I'm saying it is possible, but ideally.
Yeah, I mean, if America is really in a process of retreat as the world like burns more and more, they if that's the case, right? And that's complex to try to explain,
Yeah.
I think, for
Yeah.
most people. Um, but of course, America needs these people to fight for them, right? Um, if that's the case, then it's not really in America's interest, in order to buy time, in order to prepare for this new role of America. America's not going to use nukes in that case, because they're more interested in these wars going for a very long time.
Yeah.
Right? Now, that doesn't mean that they're never interested in Japan or Germany, rushing into Taiwan or Ukraine. I think ultimately they are, and I think Europe is preparing for that to some degree. Certainly, I think the Russians believe, whether they're right or wrong, that is something that they will want. But I think them teasing the Russians to act, to step out of line, conceals this idea that maybe this truth that America is not going to escalate towards a nuclear bomb, because they need these wars to go on for a longer period.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean there can be no scenario where they're not used.
But the slow burn is the point.
The slow burn is the
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
No, but then eventually, in turn, that would just bleed out your allies, and then
But because Israel is so important for them,
yeah,
because they prize it over anything else. This is why I think, in fact, Trump was asked tonight, would you use nuclear weapons? Yeah, he said, he dismissed it. He goes, why would you ask such a stupid question? No, I wouldn't. Right. And I would believe him on face value.
yeah,
Yeah, I have no reason to see even Trump in his current degraded state would result of that. It's not. I mean, that's the thing about nuclear weapons. There's really the only country I believe would use them is Israel, and
Yeah.
then I'll also
Yeah.
make it a contingency. I think India and Pakistan could climb the escalation ladder with enough to use them on each other. But other than that, Israel's the only country I can conceivably see using a nuclear weapon, unless the Ukrainians truly are at the gates of Moscow, which is simply not going to happen.
no,
Yeah.
unless all of Europe gets involved.
Even then, I mean,
Yeah.
let us quote Aristovich: Russia and Ukraine
Yeah.
need to unite, and then they could crush the toy armies of Europe. And whether one thinks that's an optimal outcome or not, I'm not saying it is. I don't want to see any more destruction on the European continent. He is
I love
objectively
how
right.
antiquated toy army sounds. Like, you know he's not from the West.
Yeah, yeah. It's like when Bruno, the God rest his soul, the legendary wrestler Bruno Sammartino, he was in this shoot interview where someone mentioned how Ric Flair was like bashing him. He's like, "Oh, you couldn't sell." He goes, "That's such a cartoon that Ric Flair would say that. That's such a cartoon." Like, and it's Italian. Even though he's been living in Pittsburgh for so long, he still has the Italian, Oh, that's such a cartoon that Ric Flair would say that about me. When I was in Japan, he was in the undercard. Oh,
Now,
man.
I am realizing we are almost at the 3-hour mark. If anyone has
Whatever
any-
happened to Aristovich, by the way?
I think he's still in hiding and occasionally does commentary. I follow his Telegram channel. He posts on there every once in a while.
Oh man, real Azov Patriots are triangulating his position as we speak.
Yeah, especially after the news. I mean, I don't know how much stock there is in this, but Ukraine has said, it could be just to threaten them that if Ukrainians don't come back to Ukraine, we're going to have to import Africans.
Oh yeah,
to
I saw
Ukraine.
that article. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why would
Yeah.
Putin make them do this?
Yeah. They chartered the migrant boats, all of them. The Russians, all of them.
migrant crisis solved. Starmer and Macron redirect the ships to the Straits of the Dardanelles.
Oh.
Erdogan, I know we've had our differences.
Yeah,
I think we can. I think we can come to an agreement on one thing and one thing only, just this one time.
The reason they won't do it now is because they're afraid of Ukraine letting them loose. Just like Erdogan.
I wouldn't even say letting them loose. I mean, what's the
They'll
mechanics they
just-
would have to even stop that? I mean, we already see the amount of illegal emigration from Ukraine. The people who get past the border guards, either through bribery or just sheer evasion, that end up in Romania, Moldova, Poland, Hungary. So, I mean, now put a bunch of people from a country that has been just engulfed in civil war for the past 40 years who don't have understanding of European social norms or even, say, post-Soviet social norms, if you want to be that particular. They're going to run rampant, even if they're the hypothetically best behaved people in the world. Under those circumstances, they're going to run rampant.
It's impossible.
Yeah, like I said, and they're probably, let's be honest, they're probably not going to be the model citizens even from their own societies who are coming over. But even if they were, there's just no scenario in which this works. Do you really think you're going to be able to throw these guys in the TCC vans? Do you really think you're going to be able to get them 5 days of training and send them to the front lines, and that's going to plug the gaps for Ukrainian losses? No. I mean, they tried that with the Colombians, and perhaps I overstate, and perhaps I mean to exaggerate, which I do. But point being is, it's such a clownish idea. Ukraine is so dysfunctional, it can't even properly implement Western mass migration. That's where we're at right now.
Yeah. I mean, imagine having to tell them what borscht is. They'll never get over the name.
Fight as a fight.
Fight as a fight.
Oh man!
Every demand Zelensky makes, every law he passes against hate speech or anti-Semitism or whatever, and the more they dig in, the more they fight. And the best part is, they're going to be the scapegoats at the end of the war. They're going to be the so-called Russian collaborators when Ukraine eventually loses this war. And
you think?
I could conceivably see a scenario in which to liquidate these factions. They brand them as the quote-unquote Russian collaborators, the ones that don't get recruited by the intelligence agencies, I should say. And
well, I think we said this a year or two ago about that basically that, you know, the far-right battalions, they're going to be the first to go.
Yeah, they're the fall
because
guys.
the globalists, they're not going to tolerate those people. Like that's
the ones they cannot recruit to fight elsewhere are going to prison. It's just that simple. Or they're going to be taken care of in some form because they're the dogs of the American Empire, and they're going to get their Fell For It Again award.
They're not going to be allowed to control Ukraine either if there's a serious collapse of the government. So
absolutely not.
That's never going to be allowed. I mean, unless, like, I see, like, certain libtards, like, they'll say, like, you know, they're not actually far right or whatever. But when it comes right down to it, you're not going to really have a coalition of very ideologically motivated and pissed off young men who are on the far right controlling the government in that region. Like, in terms of, like, the playbook of elites in Europe and, like, globalism in general. Like, it's not, I don't really see that happening.
Let me just put it this way. Final thought on Ukraine for the show. Barring the Belarusian model, which is a long, long stretch, even if Russia gets its maximal goals in terms of territory and demilitarized zones and all those particulars, the idea of a Ukrainian rump state becoming like Belarus, long prospect, is the only functional government Ukraine gets. Because if there's the quote-unquote neutral Ukraine, quote-unquote NATO Ukraine, like I said, even assuming Russia takes all the territory it wants, has the buffer zones, has the de facto control, whatever it might be, there's nobody in Ukraine, including these guys, who can build a stable government. And the minute you give them anything resembling European Union membership, like they talk about, they try to do all the workarounds. You thought the emigration rate has been terrible thus far. The entire country, anyone with means to leave will leave. It will be a mass immigration that probably even dwarfs the post-Soviet period.
Yeah. Yeah, and the fact that they're even talking openly about just carving it up as well. And then importing people, like it's a tragedy.
And one thing I will say, obviously the show might have some biases, and I clearly don't have the most objective takes on certain things, but this is an opinion program at the end of the day. I try to stay as objective as possible, but also this is a platform for me to give my opinion and my analysis. I will recommend everyone, I recommend it all the time, the channel Videos from Mariupol. You could say it's propaganda, you could say whatever, but I do think it is objectively good work. You can look at what life on the other side of the front line looks like. What life in these Russian towns that are rebuilt, both the good and the bad, because the Russians aren't just throwing up these Potemkin villages for the sake of the cameras, nor are they rebuilding, say, first world infrastructure. They're building these cities back up to what they were, and then even beyond what they were under Ukraine, because the Ukrainian state completely failed them in that regard. And compare any of these areas. I think Melitopol is a great example because it was caught completely off guard at the beginning of the war. It fell without resistance because the Ukrainians did not have any defense there. And compare that to, say, I don't know, any comparable sized city in Western Ukraine. And I can tell you who has the better standard of living just without even doing any research.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's really the final point I had on Ukraine. I'll give the floor to you guys if you want to make any closing statements for this program.
I wanted to talk about the SPLC thing, but it's way too late. That would take a few hours to talk about.
Yeah,
Sure.
we'll have
Or
to
an
have you
hour.
back. There were some other things I wanted to mention that we joked about on the show before, but it's just, I mean, it's already nearly one.
Peter
And
Thiel got us. He ensnared us.
stupid.
He had his 22 points. Alex Karp, he got us with his article,
Yeah.
and it was a valuable discussion nonetheless. But we'll need a follow up on some of the points that you were.
Yeah, let's have a
referring to.
follow up in a couple of weeks.
So yeah,
Yeah.
we will hammer out the details on that, the particulars on that. Do you have any reason why I should tell people to give this man your money?
Nah.
Anything in particular, I should say.
Oh, I just came out with the second part of the essay on young
On young.
UFOs and modern art.
Read it. Give him
I
your
talk about
money. You know the drill.
Parapsychology.
I'm still waiting for that Swedish UFO channel. Stories lost. They'll never bring up Carl Jung.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my god. My brain's kind of fried right now, but I don't know. Closing statement. I heard that news about the Ukrainian immigration thing, and I know like the impulse is to say, well, we've been saying this for a while. Anyone could have predicted this, but the fact that these very evil people are so blatant about it, and they are just willing to toss their strongest soldiers aside, it's I could say fell for it again award, but at the end of the day, it is a tragedy, and it's
People
a very
in
evil
Ukraine-
thing that they're doing. Yeah, like the Ukraine
People in Ukraine and Eastern Europe, like big swaths.
Yeah,
My friend is Romanian. He's nothing like his mom and does not share the opinions of his mom. And I've met people, Poles, etc. They are so invested. I mean,
Mhm.
Poland has a festival where people like dress up to look American, right? They're so invested, right? Because to them it's their anti-Russia moment.
yeah,
And no matter how bad things get, they will that's the hill that they're going to die on. Ukraine is there right now. I don't know, like again, large swaths of people are like that in parts that used to be part of the Soviet Union at one point. And some of them are very invested in this. We'll see. I don't think they're quite at the caliber of the Ukrainians, right? Because for the Ukrainians, in many ways, for the Ukrainians, they think like this is how we get our own country. But you can't get your own country. You can't go to a store and get your own country on loans. Like that's not how it works.
yeah,
In any case, these people are so invested that they are willing to die. They are willing to go to the twilight of a certain epoch for them, and if they don't get a country, well, at least they tried. I like honestly,
yeah,
because it's something that they've always wanted. They've harbored this their whole lives, and that's their red line. They will partner with the most despicable people if as long as you can facilitate this for them. they'll follow you to the ends of the earth. And there are people, there are identities out there that will do that.
I mean,
Yeah.
in terms of the Ukrainians, just looking at some of the funerals that happen in Ukraine, it's just
It's ridiculous.
it's comical, but it's also morbid. It's just
Yeah.
like this. It's the embodiment of what they died for. And once again, one might say I'm Russia shilling whatever, but you look at the funerary ceremonies the Russians give them when they don't return the bodies, and it's in line with what their ancestors got. It's usually just an Orthodox funeral, or at least a grave with a cross on it. But you look at the ones who are, I shouldn't say all, but a troubling number of the ones that take place in quote-unquote free Ukraine. It's just cargo cultism based on an idea of America that existed in 1980.
Well, remember when one of those leaders of the Da Vinci battalion, you can imagine what kind of battalion this is, the former Finnish, what was she, a prime minister? Moran. She went to attend his funeral. This was the idiot who, in his casket, they had Lego and McDonald's.
Yeah, I remember this. Yeah.
This is what I mean, and it happened with one of the death of a nationalist. That's what they're saying. They're saying if we have to die, I mean, it's all in America's hands. That's it forever, because they can't do it without them, and that's why they will get buried with Lego and Happy Meals. As stupid as that looks, and it's stupid, that's what they're willing to do. You know.
Yeah,
No, but that's what I mean. It's a total mockery of that nationalist sentiment. It's a total mockery of that people. But if it's, I understand from the Ukrainian perspective, it's a sacrifice they're willing to make. But at the end of the day, I mean,
I'm not gonna.
let me quote the film 8mm. When you dance to the devil don't change. He changes you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that's,
really.
Yeah.
And we're going on too late for me to relitigate Ukrainian nationalism, but there's there's a certain twinge of sadness, I suppose one could say, considering the fact how intertwined their nation is with Russia and what form that could have looked like instead of just being the.
Well, this is the way they claim their divorce.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
But like I said, considering what Ukraine could be, there's just no words.
And then all the evil in the back end with the trafficking and the exploitation. Yeah.
There's no, first of all, like, what is Ukraine? Can Ukraine be Happy Meals and Lego? Those are just, that's just dreams and aspirations. That's not a cult. That's not an identity.
That's the global
Like,
non
you're
place.
just, like, you're going to do this to own the Russians without a capitalized R? Like that with this?
Oh, it's sad.
Well, I suppose before we go on any longer, once again, check out. Look, let me.
GiantProductions.com. GiantProductions.com.
Yes, thank you.
There you go.
But all
Patreon,
to say,
Substack.
every time I listen or engage with anything that Geo does, it's always good. You've not disappointed me yet. So
yet. No.
Yeah, we gotta have our off ramps, but
we all have our we all have our cool takes. Obviously,
I hope you could say the same about me, but I won't be offended if you can't. But with all that being said, thank you everyone for tuning in, and
thank you,
we'll see you
Gio.
Yeah, thanks.
Certainly,
thank
Gio.
you, boys. It's been a blast. It's been great.
And with that,
God bless. Goodbye.
We'll see you next time.